in some ways it's great
I
that
think
you're bringing this back to the
I,
surface,
I think there is.
because then at least people would be understanding the context more.
Yeah. Well, I think there is though, because it wasn't that long ago Jack stepped down from Twitter. I think replays might have been active. It'd be interesting if they are.
Correct. But remember the conversations with Dave and Ben and our fun conversations back in the day when Trader Joe Chris was with us. We used to go down these conversations just in general because we used to do so many rooms. Ben used to do a lot of rooms on crypto. So we were like kind of talking about this quite a lot as an intersection, right? And that's what I'm saying that's very interesting is the intersection, because by making it private, it also does, in my opinion, and Tyler, you could probably, and Ben could dovetail on this as well, and Jorge, it does allow them to sort of navigate the crypto aspect of Twitter a little bit more
Right.
in a
Puts it
way
front and
where
center.
he
Right.
could literally use Dogecoin as the currency component that is shared and paid across the platform of Twitter, where so many of the NFT, DeFi, and devs hang out.
So I want to finish this tweet thread because I keep I keep stopping at number two. Number three of the six is from Jack Dorsey. He says the idea and service of Twitter is all that matters to me, and I will do whatever it takes to protect both. Meaning the concept of Twitter and the actual fundamental service of Twitter is what's important to him, not the company of Twitter, which is a totally separate thing because the idea came first. It turned into a company later. When he had the idea, he thought of it fundamentally as a protocol. That's how he would love to see it happen. Like SMS is a protocol that other apps build on top of, or email is a protocol that other apps build on top of. And that's why in the early days of Twitter, they welcomed app developers to build using the Twitter protocol. That was the original vision. And it was always fundamental to Jack's vision that this is a sort of protocol and that tweets will function as some kind of, for the time being, text-based protocol. Anyway, so he says then, and here's where it gets wild. Twitter as a company has always been my sole issue and my biggest regret. Oh boy, here he goes. Not pulling any punches. And it has been owned by Wall Street and then the ad model. Taking it back from Wall Street is the correct first step. In principle, I don't believe anyone should own or run Twitter. It wants to be a public good at a protocol level, not a company. Solving for the problem of it being a company, however, Elon is the singular solution I trust. I trust his mission to extend the light of consciousness. Which, by the way, tells you that they spent time sipping champagne on a boat somewhere or in a jacuzzi. When you start reflecting on, he's conceding that he's had really heartfelt Elon type conversations where he starts going into his deep philosophy of things, which is usually reserved for the hot tubs, right? So Jack clearly is conceding that he's had those conversations with Elon and they've kind of bonded over that. And that's why he fundamentally trusts Elon singularly to do what's now been done, which implies, rather strongly implies, that this was a coordinated effort from the get-go. That Jack potentially even approached Elon and said, hey, you know what? I need to take Twitter back private. Would you be interested in helping me do that? Here's what I suggest. I'm going to step down from the CEO role because it wouldn't be appropriate for the CEO to take the company back, now would it? So I'm going to step down as CEO. I'm going to put this other guy who I trust as CEO. I'm going to take a little step back. I'm still going to have a seat on the board so that I can be there for the vote when the vote needs to happen. I need you to come in and make an offer. I might even provide some of the money. We can both throw in the money together. We know a few other billionaires that will throw in the money, and we can take this thing private. And here's why we should take it private. Number one, because identity verification, which used to be technically a very challenging manual process, is now technically feasible at scale. And if we can do identity verification at scale across this social network, oh boy, does that fundamentally change some of the products and features that we can offer. Especially with, yes, I'm just scratching the surface. Because once you do the identity verification at scale, technically, then you can do, that opens up really interesting opportunities And by the way, what a coincidence that Elon Musk keeps referencing this when he talks about buying it, that he's going to unlock the potential, and he keeps referencing verifying everybody. So Jack knew this was coming. Elon knew it was coming. And when you add in the payments layer, which they clearly are both incredibly focused on, Jack has a digital payments company. Elon had a digital payments company. They both would dream to have an asset like Twitter to enable digital payments with identity verification and selling of digital products and services of all kinds. You already have every major figure in the world on the platform. And the trick with, let me put it this way, Amazon got every big seller, retailer, wholesaler. Well, really, Alibaba got all the wholesalers. Amazon got all the retailers. But who got every person who can sell everything that they do? Right? Not the businesses, but the people. Where are you going to sell your stuff? Are you thinking you're going to sell it on eBay? Give me a fucking break. That's like from the 80s or some shit. No one's using eBay. So why, if there was a way to do identity verification and international transfer of payments digitally, instantly, anywhere, anytime, and we now have new digital products and services in the forms of NFTs and Web3 and physical goods, that if I need a shop, I need to sell something, right? Where am I going to sell it? Seriously. Twitter now is on the brink of offering that. They have offered it. It does exist. They've piloted it. They have had a few accounts that they've greenlit that have a carousel of swipeable products under their Twitter bio and above their top pinned tweet. And it's like a little swipeable with your finger. You swipe through the products that person has to sell and you can buy them. That is absolutely mind-blowingly big potential. Where else are you going? Yeah, people do go to Facebook to try to sell shit. Yes, it's called Facebook Marketplace. Without identity verification, by the way, for the most part, this would be potentially a much bigger, better version of Facebook Marketplace, which is on its own worth a substantial amount. I think and when you add in the crypto element, this whole thing could get very interesting very quickly, and Elon and Jack knew that, so that's why it was, for I think multiple reasons. Jack stepped down and coordinated with Elon to do this whole thing, and I didn't mention, obviously I couldn't have known the Elon piece when Jack resigned, although when Jack resigned, I did suggest that I think he might be up to something that would lead to him taking the company private again, then it's a prerequisite that he step down. And then when Elon made his offer, I did think it was about payments and identity verification features, but the idea that they were in cahoots together, to me now, today, seems abundant. Well, in part because he's saying in this tweet thread, here it is, Elon's goal of creating a platform that is maximally trusted and broadly inclusive is the right one. This is also Parag's goal, and that's why I chose him. Meaning that his decision to choose the CEO came after the knowledge that Elon would be involved in this. Did you pick up on that? He knew Elon would be involved before he made Parag the CEO, meaning before he stepped down as CEO. So, and why I chose him. Thank you both for getting the company out of an impossible situation. Oh, snap. What impossible situation were they in?
So it was a total plot.
Right.
From start to finish.
With Elon. And thank you both for getting the company out of an impossible situation. This is the right path. I believe it with all my heart, which is a wildly different path than what Twitter was on 48 hours ago, which has got a lot of the Twitter folks who are there with their knickers in a twist, as they say. I'm so happy Twitter will continue to serve the public conversation around the world and into the stars. Kind of a cute ending, but really interesting move. I think the interesting moves that are to come with crypto, with NFT, with Web3, with decentralized, and all the things that Jack is passionate about and Elon's passionate about could get very, very interesting relatively quickly. And here we are. And by the way, Jack was on the board. And so when the board was meeting about now we know something that we can only wait to see in the movie whenever, that gets made, which is Jack sitting on the board, and the board's deliberating whether to accept this offer, and Jack's like, damn right we're accepting this offer. This is my whole scheme from the beginning.
I have an interesting anecdote. A year ago, I was at the Bitcoin conference, and there's a neurosurgeon friend that some people on stage know. But I'm not going to divulge his name, but he did share this in Clubhouse, as well as to me personally. But so it's not divulging anything. So he had a dinner at his house that he rented out at the Bitcoin conference a year ago, and Jack Dorsey showed up because it's a friend of his, and at the table, a lot of the guests were grilling him on, the censorship issues and all those things. And he said to 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 the dinner table that he might be the CEO, but he doesn't own Twitter, and the decisions and the direction that it's going aren't his, and that his goal was to make Twitter a decentralized social media platform, and that was his goal. And then once that was done, he would dedicate the rest of his life to Bitcoin. And it looks like it was true, things that he said.
Tyler, can
Besides,
I add a
yeah, Ben,
complementary perspective? Yeah.
of course. Well, I just want to piggyback, tie a bow on Jorge's point there, which is Jack also has expressed making the Twitter algorithm transparent. So has Elon Musk in the past few hours. And Jack also has what I think is a totally brilliant concept, which is the letting the user themselves choose which algorithm they want and allow anyone to make algorithms. And again, this speaks back to the Twitter protocol, where Twitter becomes a protocol there, and people can build their own algorithms for sorting the tweets as they wish. And the New York Times can have their own algorithm that features left-leaning journalism, and some DJ from Ibiza can have his own algorithm that prioritizes other things, and you can select almost from an app store like interface which algorithm you want to have. That would completely remove the burden of content moderation on Twitter and put it on the users. That's how you get out of that crazy regulatory quagmire that the social networks find themselves in, that they're responsible for their algorithms. Oh, and by the way, in the past 48 hours, the EU just ruled, and we laughed, that these social platforms are going to have to become perfectly transparent with their algorithms in the past 48 hours. And
Fantastic.
right. And now Jack Dorsey I've heard it. No, I don't know why no one else has heard it. I've heard him say this, what I think is a totally genius plan. Well, not only will the Twitter algorithm it could be the default, and it'll be transparent, and anyone else can make one, and you can make one too, just like an app store. And there you go, senators. Everyone can pick whatever algorithm they want. And so we are no longer responsible for controlling what gets seen and what gets said, because it's up to everyone to pick their own algorithm, and they control what gets seen and what gets said. The onus goes on to the user, not the platform. It's kind of brilliant, and it goes back to Twitter being a platform. Ben, sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no
That is
problem. Well,
brilliant.
in a way, you preempted. But 10 minutes ago, I retweeted something for you, which was Elon Musk's tweet about whether Twitter should go open source or not. I'm not sure it's a done deal that each person will choose their own algorithm. The other possible history here is that the Twitter algorithm becomes open source, and that the community as a whole contributes to the algorithm. How do we know that it's going to be one algorithm first source? I understand the regulatory impact of that, but the other way of looking at it is that the community write the algorithm, understand it, and can contribute to it in the same way that a lot of open source projects work. If the reason I think that might be the case is because that I've been trying to work out what's Elon Musk's, if he's going to look at Twitter from first principles and start again, what's he going to do that's different? So he came to cars, and electric cars have always been better. The physics of electric cars is better, but the fuel was the problem, right? And you couldn't charge as quickly as you could have gas stations. So he did something brilliant, which is he really supercharges at the same time as the Teslas. I think that was the pivotal thing. is that you could actually own a car that you could actually charge. They go together. Now, there's a whole commercial thing around Teslas. The sexy thing he did was to make them sexy. They're actually a better car to buy. They're actually fun to own. So what's he going to do with Twitter? Well, you've talked a lot about the sexy side, the NFTs, whatever, all the stuff that makes Twitter sexy. But what's the first principles, fundamental change he's going to make that's really going to do good in the world? And I think it could be, the master stroke could be to make it open source. But the question is because then you're solving the meta problem of misinformation, which is not being in the individual piece of information battle, but it's in, well, let's as a world make the algorithm. And by the way, as a side effect, the smart people are the ones who help make the algorithm and everybody else doesn't, which maybe is a good thing. You solve the meta problem of information digestion and filtering. So that's my thought, is do we know that it would be an algorithm per person, or could it just mean the algorithm becomes open source?
Could
Yeah.
I forecast a different outcome? And Ben, I think that's a really reasonable one to think about. And there may be that branch of Twitter that is fully open source, but I've been hoping for a long time that we'd be able to customize our own algorithms for precisely this reason. And what I had hoped would emerge out of that capability is a set of templates. And I think that a lot of people in this room are accustomed to sourcing from the center, the left, the right, to really hear openly different perspectives. And what I suspect might emerge out of this is sort of right wing templates, left wing templates of algorithms, so that you can see what different political echo chambers are thinking without having to be bombarded with everything or just your own little echo chamber. So I think a potential outcome here is that there will be published patterns or templates for how to filter that will serve individuals and news sources as a window into what is this demographic, what is this political party, what is this religious belief system thinking about the issues of the day, so that you could do your sampling fairly real time across the spectrum, knowing which template you're operating within. So I'm curious, Ben, if you think that that's a potential outcome.
I don't, because I think that collapses down to what you end up with is you're then going to want to create your own weighted algorithm that weights these different views based on your view. I think that what you're talking about just exasperates what we've already got, the divisiveness and the division. I think what we can achieve eventually is a master algorithm that just doesn't perpetuate bollocks, that just you look for stuff that is verifiably true or fundamentally possible. You accentuate that using whatever technology we can, including zero knowledge proofs and the like, as Nicholas would like to go on about. And you not suppress the rest, but you just let the stuff that is most salient outshine the other stuff. I mean, I was just given on a back channel in the Ukraine room. So somebody came on and said, "Oh, the Russians have the Ukrainians have just captured a thermobaric missile and used it against the Russians." And the video that tries to purport this is recorded on a top end cinema camera, like an RI or whatever you call them, or something like that. There's no way that somebody on the battlefield is shooting that video. It's obvious looking at it. That was not shot incidentally on the battlefield. This is clearly cinema level propaganda. And therefore, you don't really need to worry any further if you have that information. It's that type of analysis and millions of other root cause analyses like that can help you just flag up and say, hang on, this wasn't recorded on an iPhone. This isn't some dude on the battlefield. This is a cinema shot. And a long tail of analyses like that can rule out impossibilities in information. I do think I would favor a master algorithm that is open.
Oh, I would favor the same thing, but what I'm suggesting is that could be one of the patterns that people could opt into, and you and I and many people in this room would opt into that one. But in addition, if Elon really wants to maximize the public square and everybody is validated as to who they are, it would still be of value to know what's going on in micro communities. And if they have the ability, which I think they'll absolutely want, to segment their feeds to conform to their own echo chamber, that having both of those available in a parallel optionality might accommodate the goal of keeping it open and a public square, as well as, to your point, providing a validated source from amongst all sources.
So
John, that's an automatic consequence of it being open source, is that there will be forks and there'll be all and sundry trying, just like there is every other cryptocurrency is a fork of Bitcoin, effectively, pretty much. Some of them are ground up restarts, but so there will be a completely open marketplace. There will be every adjustment of the algorithm you can imagine. The question is what becomes the predominant or one or ones. So
right, but
I have
fundamentally,
So
few.
I think we're agreeing, Ben. I think we're agreeing, just a different
yeah,
way
yeah,
of
absolutely,
looking
no,
at it.
absolutely,
But
yeah, yeah.
I think we're absolutely agreeing on that.
here I want to make something
Tyler,
clear
I
though.
have few points.
Once, okay, hold on. This could be this strategy of a marketplace of algorithms could then bring China onto Twitter because the CCP could have its own algorithm, and in China you have to use the CCP's algorithm. But then anyone could use the CCP's algorithm if they so chose, and then you would have the Chinese engaging in Twitter to the degree that the CCP enables them to, and
Precisely.
Russia as well. And the point being that where people get upset is when they feel like they're being manipulated or controlled against their without having opted into it. And Twitter's default algorithm is it's impossible to please everybody because even in the US alone it's impossible to please even just Americans, and it's even impossible just to please the senators on Capitol Hill because half of them want one side, they want critical race theory to be censored, and then on the other side, they want everything to do with you know far right speech to be censored of all types. So the idea that okay, we aren't going to we're not forcing anyone to choose this default algorithm. You can choose it yourself, and once you do, that's on you. But we also need to give you other alternatives so that you all feel empowered, that no one's forcing you to digest content, that we are manipulating you through some big propaganda scheme or whatever. You've opted into it. It really gives the agency and power back to the user in a way that removes a lot of the burden of all of the content and impossible tightrope moderation task that the platforms currently are trying to navigate, especially as they now have to, in the past 48 hours, EU just ruled, they have to be transparent anyways. So there's no real benefit to being a singular, and it will be slightly embarrassing for some of these algorithms to reveal how they jiggered their algorithms if they become public. I don't know. I have to read what the EU ruling is. But my point is that's no longer a game they really want to be in. I think it really provokes this concept that Jack preemptively anticipated. I think it's brilliant. I'm sorry, whoever was that Aram that I cut off.
Yes, you didn't cut me off, Tyler. Hello, good morning, everyone. Fascinating discussion. Very good timing, for me to be here because since yesterday, no, not before, before that, when I went to Austin on the Gigafactory opening, I heard Elon speaking about the future of AI and how the FSD program and the future vision of full self-driving is integrated with the real life AI training. Uh, Combining that speech with his TED talk, the nuggets over there were he wants the algorithm to be accessible and free. The idea of free speech is embedded in there, but my personal thoughts, just my opinion, is this has to do with complete openness in terms of learning how humans actually think without inhibition. Why is that? And why Twitter is important there, why the algorithm is going to play an important part in terms of the data collection is because by opening up this algorithm, every single human would be able to transmit or kind of shape, I don't know the technical terms, their own feed or algorithm in a way that would indicate their thought process. And why is that important for Elon and that company to learn about how humans think? The future of Optimus, the robot, and the FSD driving programming are dependent on how this AI learn and understand how we think, how we focus our attention, and if the automation is the future in terms of cars and robot related stuff, the AI really need to know how we think. So that's why I believe it's going to be completely open, individualized, because every single sample of human thought process is needed for the AI to learn from it, and then that would be integrated with the Neuralink, and the AI is learning from it. So that's what I think why Twitter is important in that regard, and it's going to be open in a way that you can customize it personally.
So what you're describing, though, is not simple passive observation, it's interaction.
Yes.
And that means that there are all kinds of both obvious but more importantly subtle ways that that can reshape behavior. And going back to the notion of having the algorithm that controls your feed be just something that you select from an app store, there are all kinds of exploits, really potentially insidiously subtle exploits to propagate disinformation, and while making it look even more legitimate. And that's one of the big problems. On the other hand, I did want to go back to Ben's point about open source. Open source can mean a lot of things, but one thing that is very important about it is inspectability. And if you truly have inspectability where people can look at some code and understand what it means and therefore have a good idea of how it will behave, then that improves transparency. If on the other hand, it's just a huge, complicated mess with lots of parameters. And I did want to mention in terms of what John was saying, really, John, it seemed to me like what you were describing was really more control over the parameters of the algorithm, which is kind of a different thing. But parameter spaces can be huge, and there as well. You can have something that looks simple but is actually too complicated to fully understand. At least for anybody who isn't going to spend like their life on trying to understand it. But the point being is that you can have what's being described here as a way of like not the platform itself, not controlling things, but actually it makes the problems that are really concerning and potentially threatening to democracy and maybe even civilization, that is the insidious nature of disinformation, especially during crises, even worse.
And I agree. I agree
I
with you.
just
I've,
want to
I've I've
respond.
done a lot of open source work, and the documentation and implementation guides will be critical to providing the kind of accessibility that you're describing. And I think that would be just unbelievably elegant if they implemented this in such a way that the documentation and implementation guides achieve that level of accessibility, so you actually know what you're getting within a particular branch of the open source patterns.
And to do that, you need to constrain the complexity and the parameter space, because otherwise it just blows up exponentially and you'll never be able to understand how it'll behave in the edge cases. And you can have somebody authoring an algorithm so that they know how to get it into edge cases where nobody understands how it will behave and explore.
Eli, not my share was not in terms of the exploit, but if you are to train a robot who wants who is there to take care of you, for example, but the control have to be through your thoughts, through Neuralink and through your thought process. How are you going to train the AI to have that kind of thought process? Only way you can have that kind of thought process for the AI to develop is for the AI to know exactly how human thinks. And how would you collect that kind of data, to train the AI and to have the robot who can take care of you with your thoughts, like Optimus is going to do in the future. Somebody's unmuted on the stage. Okay, so for that reason, if that's the it's all just like a speculation on my part here, but if Optimus is supposed to understand your needs and be controlled with your thoughts, the AI first need to know how human think on a very huge scale to incorporate every single sample of human thoughts. And that's why Twitter, with this number and being open, with the future, like open sourcing or whatever you want to call the technical term is, I don't know that. But if the idea is to train the AI so the thought can control the robot, you need that data, you need that type of training. And that's how they are going to use it, in my opinion.
Yeah, Aaron, I totally support you. When Elon Musk came out with the Tesla bot, I said the exact thing. Now what he needs to do is combine all his behavioral data from Neuralink and from Tesla, how you're driving the car, and now adding Twitter to it in order to achieve the generalized AI robot he's talking about. And yeah, I mentioned when I first heard about the Elon Musk wanting to buy Twitter, I was immediately reminded about what his ideal version is of the future, to have basically a global direct democracy. And now that Tyler mentioned that this was a plan with the Twitter founder all along, maybe it's kind of, I still think that's kind of still the real bigger goal behind this. If it will be a good outcome or bad, we don't know, but I still think he's convinced that the more direct involvement of everyone in a more direct decision making of how the globe will be working is like his future goal.
Well,
I
there's a
mean,
bunch of
he said that, sorry, he said that in his TED talk, if anybody can, go back and listen to it in Canada, that for FSD to work, we need to solve the AI problem. And for the AI problem to be solved, we need a human consciousness expansion of vision and consciousness. And how will we achieve that? And if you combine that, thought with what he said earlier, 2 weeks ago, at the Gigafactory, and then what he's been tweeting. There is a picture that's shaping up, which is kind of obvious. But yes, free speech is another way to gain that access to human uninhibited thoughts, in my opinion. So it's not like he's been very secretive about it. He's been talking about it, if you kind of pay attention. That's why I think it has a lot to do with the not only expansion of the AI, but also developing a system that works for all the human around the globe, like his futuristic view.
I'll have to counter that. From an AI standpoint, I think, well, first of all, remember historically that Microsoft tried a very small example using Twitter to train an AI, and it turned into a racist chatbot. Twitter would not be a source of good quality data to be feeding into an AI. I mean, working with this in this area, that, we spend probably the hardest part of the AI is cleaning up the data we're feeding and training our systems with. So Twitter would not be a good place to do that with. So I don't see him doing that.
I agree. And furthermore, how are you going to possibly have good trading data when you have no anonymity and no privacy? There is no election, there is no free speech unless you have privacy. And as soon as you do authentication and verification to the extent that the government is going to compel them to, the whole platform becomes the antithesis of free speech.
Right, and let's not forget also, Twitter doesn't represent all of civilization. We're only talking about, I think, what, 300 million active users daily? So this is
125.
not, is it 325?
I
125.
mean, not yet, not yet. Given the satellite, which can provide internet in remote location, and then expansion, of this technology. And Twitter is not the only data he has. He has the data from FSD, like for past how many years? The cars that been collecting data, and that's not the only technology he had. He personally said he want to remove the bots. How is he going to do that? That means he has some kind of technology to take care,
No,
identify and remove the bots, and combining everything that he has. I mean, this is just my opinion, speculation. Sorry.
And I
the
wanted
way
to add that there are a lot of universities out there that look at, and I also did that. I was part of that at some point, to look at mental states and analyze mental states through Twitter posts and also other forum posts. But Twitter is the most used because it's easy to harvest data, and you of course clean up the data. But if you don't care about the politics thought, what people have, you can recognize a mental states pattern in tweets from people. And I'm not the only one that did this. Like, a lot of different university groups have been doing this.
I think there's two parallel thread conversations going on here. One's about misinformation, and the other's about AI and the usefulness of the data. I think the more immediate conversation is about how do we combat misinformation. One thing to point out is if there's misinformation, you can only have misinformation if you believe in a information, to judge it against. And I do think there are external objective realities that we can agree upon. We discover this when we try and make rockets or planes or do anything that where people have to collaborate to, have a cause leading to an effect. And I think the problem is that there's a lot of different groups of people with different sets of beliefs, many of which are not consistent amongst themselves. And I think that some exogenous brain, like a future version of Twitter with the right algorithms, may be to help us to reconcile our thoughts and to help us to recognize and shed some light on the inconsistencies within the way that we speak. So, or think rather. So going back to what Tyler said, I think as a phased approach, it could be. I can't quite see how it would work, but it could be a genius stroke to make it Twitter a place that the Chinese and the Russians want to go to. Let them have their own versions of the algorithm that make it behave how they want to start with. And perhaps from there, once they're engaging and sharing, we can all start to get on the same page by, maybe if Eli's right that it's about tweaking parameters, maybe we can realize that there's something wrong with our parameters. There must be something wrong with us, as if you like, as the West, the way we're looking at things, for it to be so different to the way that, say, the Chinese and Russians look at things. I would like to know where our blind spot is. We must have one or two inconsistencies, blind spots, and it's pretty clear they do too, or they wouldn't be murdering people all over the place. So I'm pretty sure that somehow we can come together through, and a great way to do it would be to not just share ideas back and forth, but to share the meta, which is what is the algorithm by which we sort our ideas, and try and come to some sort of consensus on that. If we could do that, that would be real progress.
I
Figure
mean,
I
the
think that
problem, the blind
it would.
spot is obviously that we are developed through evolution to just become fitter in our kind of niche, and it's to get more resources, to get more people that we can basically have sex with, and more kids with. And that does so the algorithm, whatever it is, if you let it just go, it will always evolve in that type of way. And this is not to be the closest to reality. You want to be the closest to what makes you fitter in your niche wherever you are. And that is, I think, the thing people really forget about the whole thing is we are not evolved to be morally and closest to reality. We are evolved to do whatever it takes to have the most resources and to get the most kids and to spread our genes the best way. And
I
if we do
think
not
that,
see that and make rules about that, you end up always like this.
but I think the way to do that is to make better predictions about the physical world around us. You look at the free energy principle by, I've forgotten the chap's name. Somebody here will know the chap's name. Is it Friedman or somebody?
No, I'm
Carl
sorry,
Friedman.
it's
Gibbs.
not. Like, not for social interaction. You can read the book from the mathematician at Berkeley, The Case Against Reality, and he even did evolutionary experiments with other organisms, not just a social interaction. We don't evolve closest to reality. That's not true.
Well, if
I
we want to
agree
harvest
with
energy,
Katerina on that.
if we want to
Nicholas?
harvest energy optimally, yeah, we need to understand reality.
So I agree, for once, I agree with Katerina that Donald Hoffman's Case Against Reality is the most explanatory idea of consciousness that we have, and he argues for the classical fitness versus truth, and we make the fittest decision rather than the narratives that we tell ourselves. So it's sort of like Sophie's Choice. It's when push comes to shove, what are you going to do?
Okay.
In terms of what Ben was going to say about Gibbs free energy principle, that is something interesting. What I wanted to make the point about in terms of, I think, what Aram said, is that the issue is not one of bots, and he's going to clean up the bots. There's a clear dissonance there, and the dissonance, and this is why Elon's so clever, is that he says, "I'll get rid of the bots." Well, the way that you get rid of the bots is very simple. You make everyone verify and authenticate that they are a human. But at that point, you lose all semblance of free speech because there is no privacy. So if you're going to get rid of the bots, you're going to verify and authenticate people, you're going to exactly limit any free speech, because people will not trust that that platform information will not go to the regulatory compliance authorities, and that they won't therefore be deplatformed for their views. And that specifically and more widely applies to regimes where they do not want people to express individual thoughts. And I'm surprised, Ben, that you think that we should be exporting this technology to countries that would sort of evolve their algorithm. That they're never going to do that. Their whole idea is of thought control, and they want to avoid people expressing any view that is not the party line. So I don't see how that's going to work.
Well, I was just building on Tyler's point there. It wasn't really my idea, more
I
Tyler's.
think
Tyler, maybe you explain.
Nicholas came in after I made the point, which is Jack has in his back pocket this idea that has not really been made very public, that to circumvent a potential regulation of this incredible, increasingly impossible tightrope of appeasing an ever more bifurcated, legislature like we have in America, where you can't get these people to agree on anything except that they hate big tech. So how do you do content moderation in an age where they are diametrically opposed? It's irreconcilable. So he has come up with what I think is a genius solution, which is you let everyone make their own algorithms, and then you become a protocol layer, and you let the users pick from an app store like Menu their algorithm, so that the onus is on you for the content that you're consuming, not the platform. So and because I think where people get upset, and I'm looking at it right here on Twitter, I'm looking at a tweet right now that says, if Elon Musk buys Twitter, a massively powerful political tool will be in the hands of an ultra-rich individual. If you think that's good for democracy, then you're part of the problem. Oh, yes, that assumes that there's only going to be one algorithm that he's controlling, and that he's in control of the content. Similarly, Jeff Bezos, of all people, says, is it possible that Elon is, where's the tweet? I'll get it right now. I don't want to misquote Mr. Bezos. It says, is it possible? Here we go. Interesting question. Did the Chinese government just gain a bit of leverage over the town square, meaning Twitter? Meaning, and the argument is, of course, that because Elon wants to do business in China, it's the second biggest market, he's willing to kowtow and twist the one and singular only algorithm more towards whatever China wants it to be. And I think the reality is going to be, I think Jack has correctly masterminded a solution here, which is you let China and the CCP create and craft their own algorithm for the people in China, just like they've done with their own goddamn internet. They have their own
So
internet.
why would they?
Yeah,
So
my
why?
point is, in China, the Chinese people will not have a choice of an app store of algorithms, or they will, but every one of those things will have been rubber stamped approved by the CCP. So people will not be able to be exposed to Twitter users that they don't approve of, et cetera, et cetera. So my point here is that this, by the way, now look at the next article. Here's an article that just came out today from the Financial Times. The EU commissioner warns Elon Musk over Twitter moderation plans. Tell me this isn't relevant. EU Commissioner Terry Breton tells Tesla chief executive Elon there are rules to content moderation. And by the way, we just passed, in the past 48 hours, what's called the Digital Services Act, which forces platforms, including Twitter, to disclose to regulators how they are tackling content such as disinformation and war propaganda and medical misinformation, yada, 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 yada. And the whole world right now has got their knickers in a twist trying to figure out how is Twitter going to optimize their one and only algorithm to do this impossible straitjacket routine.
It's a
And the
red
answer is
herring.
they're not. They're going to have 50,000 fucking algorithms that you're going to choose, and you stupid fucking idiot, are going to be responsible for the content that you consume. Just like what you put in your fucking mouth, you diabetic idiot. You are responsible, not Burger King. Stop
Tell us how you
blaming
really.
the
And Michael,
supermarket that you shop at for your diabetes and your obesity, and that's the genius of Jack Dorsey. He's going to let you decide what you're going to put in your head or mouth or ears or eyes and become a
But
platform protocol there.
that's a distraction. But that's just a distraction. These guys are smart enough to know that these are distractions. I think Bezos's point is exactly correct because we've seen it already happen. So anyone who thinks Elon is some free speech warrior or he cares about anything, just look at his actions, not his words. His actions in Xinjiang, his actions with regard to Starlink and the Great Firewall of China has been clear. He will
Yeah.
follow the rules because he has a fiduciary responsibility. So he will follow the rules that says very clearly that China is not going to allow for him to meddle in their internal systems. He's not going to allow them to break their
Even
grip
better.
over
Even better.
their internet. Right.
Even
So
better.
we can just forget about any ideas of them using Twitter. The only question is
No.
how do they interact with Twitter in the way that they have in the past, which is through disinformation, which is through sock puppet accounts. And the way that you can remove sock puppet accounts is, of course, through verification and authentication, which is
Yes.
what they're going to do. And when
Yes.
they
No
do
doubt.
that, they will have built a gilded cage because
Yes.
at that point, he has the base information, which is identity information, which is
Yes.
far more valuable than the garbage that people talk,
Yes.
on Twitter.
I
So
agree with you
the
there.
garbage that people talk, and so the idea that Jack is saying, oh, you're going to the algorithm is largely irrelevant because
Right.
that's only information that relates to the nonsense that you're talking about the daily news or whatever else. You're not talking about the sum of your lifetime on Twitter. So
and Michael, go ahead.
it's the coherence between the identity data that you pick up and all the other information that's coming from that phone, which is why Google's trying to shut down the access and why Apple's trying to shut down that access so that they can dominate that information field rather than others. So it's about coherent information because if you were to be judged solely by your interactions on Twitter, you would be a different person than if you had the sum of the content of your character that is reflected in the black mirror on your mobile phone and on your digital devices. So that's the first thing. So and it's not about the algorithms. That's just about how your feed works, right? And that's an important word, feed. You are fed information that is supposed to delight you. And so you're already self-selecting your feed and you're already feeding yourself a diet of either sugary snacks or healthy food. That's already happening. And
Right.
you can see that in people's mental health. The true issue is that people are going to be fooled, as they always are, by this idea that one man is going to come and save you. This idea, this white knight idea, is a pernicious, foolish idea because we know that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he is moving in that modality where he's already extremely loosey-goosey with the way that he adheres to the rules of the nation state. For example, in buyout secured at 420, etc. And he always says it's a joke and this, that, and the other. So he's already shown himself to be irresponsible. He's already shown himself to be capitulating to regimes where he wants to make money. And so, at the end of the day, it's only about, should we be so foolish as to think that the right thing is that one person should control a massively influential amplifier? And the idea that, by self-selecting we're going to change anything, it's not. It's going to be about social consensus. And social consensus, like fashion, is always determined by the leaders, and then they get followers. It's leader, follower, and to Katerina's point, it is evolutionary. It is mimetic. And he is a meme king, and now he has his amplifier. So you just have to see whether he turns out to be a benevolent dictator, or whether he empowers people who are not good for the world.
I think his title is actually Meme Lord, but yeah.
So there's endless
Well,
articles.
Tyler?
Second.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
I'm
want
gonna
to.
go, I'm gonna hand it to you, John. 1 second. The
No,
Vanity
no.
Fair's
Go ahead.
headline is Twitter in Elon Musk is about to learn that space travel is easier than content moderation, and that this is my point. Is like everybody's big take at the moment is how's Elon Musk gonna navigate this impossible minefield of content, which in a completely polarized world. And the solution is you don't. And how do you comply with EU transparency? You have a Twitter, you have the chronological timeline as the default. Everything else is opt in. And you wash your hands of it and say your content is your problem. We have nothing to do with that. We are a protocol. The default is the chronological, and if you want to optimize beyond chronological, you have, and your grandmother can make you her own version of Twitter. The CCP has their version. And by the way, hey CCP, would you love to have your own algorithm or algorithms that you exclusively offer to your citizens? I imagine they'll be kind of okay with that. I think if they'll tailor it to their liking, and then they'll roll it out in China, and Elon will do them one better and be like, you know what? We'll go ahead and include the CCP algorithm in the global app store for those who want to see what the CCP. By the way, me personally, I would love to see what Twitter looks like using the CCP algorithm, to be honest, from time to
Can I
time.
ask you a
Just
can I
go on
ask you a
WeChat
By the
or
way,
any of
question,
those other
Tyler?
platforms.
exactly
Can I
right.
ask
And
you?
by the way, I would also like to see the Russian version. By the way, a lot of the conflicts a lot of the headlines that we read in tech news around the world is how Russia just banned Facebook and Twitter because Facebook and Twitter are showing content in Russia that Russia doesn't want to be seen. So the solution is very obvious. Hey, Russia, you can build your own algorithms so you can control what people see inside of Russia. And every country can do that, the countries that don't allow free speech. And it's going to get and by the way,
I just don't understand, Tyler. Why would anyone need that? That when they just won't allow you access. They've got
Exactly.
firewalls.
Yeah.
Like,
my
why
point, yes,
it doesn't make any sense.
it makes all
China
the
has
sense in the world because they want access to those billion users that they currently
They
don't
have
have access
access.
to. No, they don't.
They have total access. Of course you
Twitter
do. You
doesn't
just set
have
up.
the billion Chinese people that they would love to have, nor do they have the
But
200.
they'll never. So the Chinese government will never allow those billion people to go on that platform. And the
Sure,
other
they
thing is
would.
that Twitter has to.
If they have control of the algorithm, fundamentally, they would.
But why would they? They control everything. Why would they
Right.
allow some foreign billionaire to, allow a hole in the
Because
dam? They're just
he
not
will
going.
build.
They won't let it happen. There's nothing in it for them.
Well, they're
They
going to
could,
have him on a short
Can
leash.
I,
That's
Ron?
what.
Can I,
if they could
Tyler?
control
Can I
everything that
describe?
everybody sees in China through their version of the algorithm,
They
then they
already
don't.
do.
No,
Okay,
no, they don't, and that's
Nathan,
why they had to ban Twitter. It's the same reason that Russia had to ban Twitter because Russia can't control what the people see on Twitter in Russia. Same reason Russia banned YouTube because
Right. So, but
Putin
why would
says
they invite them back in? They would. There's no
because
reason to
now the
invite them back
platforms
in.
are going to say, "Hey, guess what? We're going to do your dream come true. You are now going to be in complete and utter control of what is seen in your country," which is what
So they're going
So
to
here's the
empower.
thing.
They're going to
Here's
which
empower
is
all the
why the
forces.
Kremlin allows TikTok because TikTok does do that for the Kremlin, and now Twitter's going to do that too by letting them have their own algorithm or
Can I? Can
algorithms.
I? Can I?
Yes.
Can I
here's
report
the thing.
Michael Saylor just said in an interview? on Squawk. It's really worth watching because of his Bitcoin comments. But at the very end, he was asked about open sourcing Twitter, and his response was he thinks it's the right thing to do because it provides transparency for every individual to know whether their speech is being restricted. And so, to the question of China and other autocracies being able to deploy their version, the question becomes if you already have WeChat as the CCP and as a user in China, what incremental value would there be in having a CCP controlled algorithmic stack for Twitter? And if they saw value in allowing that as an alternative to WeChat that they still controlled and monitored, they would proceed with it if they felt like that was going to be a risk for people to see explicitly and transparently how the algorithms were curbing their free speech. It might be viewed as a negative by the CCP and they might not implement it. So it may hinge upon how much, how accessible the transparent, this is to Ellie's point, how accessible the transparency is into what's actually being done. And if it goes down the path that Michael Saylor is lauding and that Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk are proposing, it could indeed serve a multitude of purposes for the CCP as well as for the user within China to know exactly how they're being filtered and how their free speech is being abridged.
I
From
just
the
have to
And
just keep on. I just want to keep on just going back to this because it's really important. It doesn't matter about being open source. The open source bit is irrelevant if it's owned by shareholders and fiduciaries that have an interest in selling your information because that's how it's monetized, and for the benefit of those shareholders they will have a whole bunch of ideas, but at the end of the day you don't own that information. You're providing your user generated content and then you're providing your identity to that platform, which means that when that regime wants to oppress your thinking, they will have a direct line to you to an address at your door. This is not the the one thing that Jack did say that was correct is that ideally this should be completely decentralized. It should not be owned by anyone. It should not be owned by a company. The only thing that Elon can do if he wants to be a true hero here, which he's not going to be because he's got Goldman and Morgan and everyone lending him money against collateral, but if he wants to be a true hero here, he would say, I'm actually going to make this a public piece of public infrastructure, and I'm going to get rid of the shareholders completely, and I'm going to donate this to the world as free open source software that is owned by the users, and then you cannot control the information, and that the information would then, everyone could run AIs over it if they made the feed accessible, and then you really would have the solution. But short of that, there is no way that this can be free speech enhancing because it ties individuals to their statements. And if you do that, you will never get the truth because people will be afraid of their thoughts being oppressed. That's just the facts.
I
Yeah,
just want
I,
to,
that.
can I, can
yeah,
I,
I did just want to quickly step back and note that the stated intent that Elon led with was we need freedom here. We do not need censorship. And the discussion has been, look at all of the different ways we can franchise censorship.
I just want to bring back the Jeff Bezos tweets. He said that the Chinese government just gained a bit of leverage over the town square. But I think, to Tyler's point, and it just the reverse. Actually, Chinese government doesn't need Twitter at all. So it's how Elon Musk gonna put this to Chinese market. So if he really tweak all the algorithm for the Chinese government, he actually just slapped on his own face because he said freedom of speech, freedom of speech. So I will just say it's the Twitter or the Twitter in the Chinese market for the shareholder, but it's not the Chinese government need Twitter.
Yeah, but Twitter would love to get into China. The only way they can get into China they is if China had complete control of the algorithm. That's never going to happen when Twitter only has one algorithm. But as soon as you have thousands of algorithms and Twitter becomes a protocol, which is precisely what Jack Dorsey just tweeted 24 hours ago, is the whole reason for doing this whole crazy collaborative buyback privatization, was to bring Twitter back to its origin roots of no longer being a Wall Street owned company and get it back to its OG origins of being a protocol layer, and let the content piece be dealt with by the peasants, let them fight over that, and make the technology, the platform, mirror what happens in reality. When you walk around town, you're responsible for who you engage with. And if there was a system that forced you to listen to some people and not others, and silenced some people and amplified others, you'd be like, hey, what the fuck is this system? This is bullshit. I don't want to listen to that jackass on that soapbox, and I don't like you gagging that person with a. I want to decide who I want to listen to. That's human nature, right? Well, that's what the solution of endless algorithm opportunities affords you is, as soon as you start complaining about the content, you will have no one to point to but yourself. So, for example, I'm reading an article right now accusing, in this case, Facebook's algorithms of leading users, how it can fuel divisiveness and lead users down to dangerous rabbit holes, down to eating disorders and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, because that's implying that there's only one algorithm, and that algorithm's doing things that you don't like. But as soon as there's 50,000 algorithms, well, then just change the fucking algorithm if you don't like that algorithm, you jackass. And more importantly, Facebook needs to, and these platforms need to distance themselves at arm's length from these algorithms so that they are no longer responsible for the end results of these algorithms. Let everybody make them as easy as possible for people to create, so that you're just a protocol layer of all of the tweets that get done chronologically. The user picks who they follow. That's on them. That's their fault. And the sorting of that, just like Spotify has an algorithm, they recommend you things that you like. There should be multiple algorithms in that. Radio stations are essentially algorithms. They're picking songs that they think you're going to like to listen to, right? And there are tens of thousands of radio stations, and you pick the ones that you like, whatever. Twitter should be exactly the same way. There will be tens of thousands of radio stations or feeds or what have you, and the CCP will have their own, just like they have their own radio stations and TV stations that control the content that those people see in those markets. And that's incredibly lucrative for the platforms that play ball with those markets. By the way, India's probably going to want to have some influence as to what, different countries are going to have their own ways. It's incredibly lucrative and potentially win-win-win for everybody involved, except, of course, for the poor people of China. But the CCP likely stands to benefit by giving the Chinese people the impression that they now have Twitter. And Twitter certainly benefits by having access to a billion more people. Russia as well, where they currently got, by the way, their lackluster quarter is in some part as a result of having lost the Russian market. And they could get the Russian market back, get the Chinese market, who knows wherever else. But I think that this ubiquitous...
Like,
I
Go ahead.
have two questions for you, Tyler. That okay, that's fine if that was what they are trying to say, but Elon Musk is not what he's saying. He's not looking to make money. That's exactly what he said. So he should just stop saying that and be honest about it, that he wanted to have access to billions of people and make money. That's
By
one
the way,
thing. And
no,
the
by the way,
other
by the
thing,
way, by the way, Messi, you just brought up a great point, which is if Twitter's new by the way, did you hear how Jack Dorsey criticized the ad network as one of the things that he didn't like about Twitter, that he likes the protocol there and they were beheld to the ad network and blah, blah, blah. That tells me something else, which is I believe they perceive the whole new business model of Twitter is the payment network model, which, by the way, Jack Dorsey's other company, surprise, surprise, is a big digital payments company. By the way, this Elon Musk guy also formerly worked at a digital payments company that you might have heard of called PayPal. Now, my point is, Twitter, for the first 10 years of the company, was trying to figure out what their business model would be, and it eventually decided on an ad network, which makes a lot of sense. However, that does come along with a handbag of baggage and problems, which Jack Dorsey clearly articulates in his tweet thread about this privatization of Twitter, or this acquisition of Twitter. So my point is, if he isn't a fan of the second order effects of what happens to this protocol known as Twitter as a result of the ad network, they might be in the in shopping. They might be in the market for figuring out a new business model for Twitter, which is likely to be, as I've said, even before this acquisition even happened, social commerce and a payment platform, which they're going. You just come on, connect the dots, folks.
Yeah, but
That,
Tyler, if
Yeah, so
There's
I
a
have
there's a
I have two more points, Tyler, if I can. So the
okay.
other thing is also that the other thing is also, there are many things in society that we actually ban. Cancer. Well, I
Yeah, but
don't
my point is,
ask you to
you're
smoke.
you're gonna want
We don't ask
you're
you
gonna
to we
if
don't
you're go
ask you for
if the
people. I don't put a cigarette on your hand, but we try as a society, we try to discourage that as much as possible. So, what's happening in Ukraine, you don't want misinformation coming out of Kremlin, for
right,
example. So, if you are going to just open it and say free for all, these are the things as a society. There are many other things that we don't like to do, but we do because that's as a society, we try to have a better life, right? So,
Could I
I
re-
mean, mhm.
could I recall what one of our illustrious departed members of the stage often referred to as over indicating? In one sense, what Tyler's proposing as an alternative business model for Twitter is under indicating, in that he probably could have raised more money faster had he said what he intended to do, but he would have inspired others to go down the path that Tyler's characterizing. And the point I want to make is neither of the business models of really full on supporting free speech in a public square with open sourcing of algorithms is not in any way mutually exclusive with an incredibly lucrative model of social merch and payment systems that will have trillions and trillions of dollars passing through it, and a 0.001% tax on those transactions will more than justify the purchase price and does not encumber the free speech aspect of what he's trying to do.
by the way, China does use Twitter and YouTube quite extensively for their own propaganda purposes. They in Xinjiang, very notably, and Lao Y86 and his partner, what is it, Zabesta or whatever his name is, document this rather extensively. Um, and the CCP members themselves use Twitter quite regularly.
they
Ministers,
use that to write news in the Chinese. So it's like you write the news overseas first and then translate it back to the
right?
Chinese news. So yeah, it's
They
propaganda.
let
So that's for
My point
very
is
specific.
they let party members use it because they trust those people and they can control that. If they could control Twitter, if they had their own algorithm in a marketplace of algorithms, they would, I assume, welcome that. And ostensibly could be a big win-win, because if there was a CCP approved algorithm, like the reverse chronological to be exact, as the default, and 50,000 others, and CNN has their own algorithms, and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood has their own algorithms, and Best Buy, or pick your favorite celebrity or comedian, has their own. David Chappelle created his own algorithm that you can follow, so you get to see the world from their perspective, and the CCP has their approved list that people. It's a whitelisted approved list of content that they approve of. So there's very little to zero risk of people being exposed to stuff that they don't want people to see. That's how their internet works fundamentally, by the way. So this is just a natural extension of that. And it would be in the App Store, and Twitter would say, "Hey, you want to see what people in China are seeing, or what people in Russia are allowed to see?" I would love, love, love to see that. And so would Vladimir Putin, because Putin's biggest complaint with Twitter historically is, you're showing my people things I don't want them to see. And that's not just Twitter. He says the same thing to Facebook and YouTube, and he banned Facebook and Twitter and Instagram recently, and is constantly telling YouTube, please remove these channels that have content I don't want to see. And he would love to have his own version of the control of the algorithm of YouTube in Russia, and let the rest of the world have a chance to take a peek at that too. And the app as a platform gets access to those markets, which becomes much more important when your business model is a payment gateway. You're going to want to have those billion Chinese people as part of this international payment system. And
Tyler,
yeah,
some perspective, just a little bit of perspective. The meta conversation is vital, and so glad we're having it. For a little bit of perspective, though, less than 3 in 1,000 people on this planet are active Twitter users. So just imagine 1,000 people, only 3 of them this conversation is relevant to. And those active users, including all their video and all their images, which must comprise a large amount of the Twitter Firehose data feed, I just calculated produce 56 bytes of data per hour. So that's including all the images and video. They only make 56 characters an hour, the active users. So one speaker on this stage talking for just a few seconds
hang on.
will likely put out more information than they put out in Twitter in a month. So it's very few people saying very little, just for the bigger perspective. Doesn't diminish the importance of the meta conversation, but if Twitter doesn't become a lot bigger,
Hang on.
and people don't say a lot more, then it doesn't really matter.
Hang on. I just found something. You remember how I was saying I happen to know that Jack's kind of secret, not so well known plan was to introduce an app store of algorithms, right? Check this out. I just pinned it to the top of the Clubhouse room from CNN. It says Elon Musk thinks Twitter's algorithm should be public. Here's what that could mean. And he talked about it at TED. He thinks the algorithm should be public or open sourced, as we're saying. And it's because there's so much anxiety and endless articles in the past 48 hours about how Elon's going to manage the impossible minefield tightrope of appeasing everybody in a wildly bifurcated world, polarized world of non-reconcilable viewpoints. Well, how you do that is you let everyone have their own algorithm, of course. And so to prove that, read the very last sentence of the story I just pinned to the top of the Clubhouse room, where it says, Twitter's co-founder, Jack Dorsey, has called for doing more to give users control on Twitter, including responding to Mr. Musk's poll, because Elon did a poll on Twitter. And Jack Dorsey responded to the poll with a comment of his own. Here it is, quote, the choice of which algorithm to use or not should be open to everyone. The choice of which algorithm? What world is he talking about where there's multiple algorithms? Because there's currently just one, and that's why everyone's fucking knickers are in a twist, because they can't get their heads around the idea that there could be possibly more than one algorithm, and you can't please anybody with one algorithm. And more importantly, the EU in the 48 hours ago just said you're going to have to, this issue of content moderation is of such serious concern that we are now forcing these platforms to be completely transparent about their algorithms, which makes Jack Dorsey want to shoot himself in the fucking head. And all the platforms want to shoot themselves in the head when the EU says you now have to reveal precisely how your algorithm works. And they're like, this is going to be the most, you think going to the DMV is painful? Try explaining to the EU Commission how the 20,000 variables of your algorithm work. Good. Have fun with that. How about you think Bitcoin is difficult to explain to grandma? Try explaining your Twitter algorithm. So
you know what, Tyler?
The way that you wipe yourself clean of that complete shit show is to say, we don't have an algorithm. Our algorithm is real simple. It's called chronological. People follow things. We show it to them chronologically. End of story. We have another layer called the algorithm app store that you and anybody can make your own curation, like a radio station, of the content that people could then absorb. And we are the database of songs. And there are radio stations, and people can choose whatever radio station they want that has nothing to do with us. We are not in the business of content moderation at all. The default is...
It's a permanent
Don't
escape
you
hatch
remember
from
when it used to be
Section
like
230.
that?
My point is
Yeah,
that Jack Dorsey has just said in his response to Elon Musk, quote, the choice of which algorithm to use or not should be open to everyone, implying, and not very... it's not even very nebulous. He's saying rather concretely that there should be multiple algorithms that people should be able to choose between.
There's a couple big, really huge things about that. One is the transparency of the algorithm. So from here on out, moving forward, the way that reach is accomplished. This came up in another one of these discussions on this topic on Clubhouse yesterday, with regards to freedom of reach. And so the transparency of how the algorithms are pumping different types of content is important. But this opens a door that will not be closed with regards to transparency of AI algorithms because of the power that they have over our mind, and not just our mind, but how things get done.
Right. And
So,
that, by the way, let's go back to the radio station metaphor, because if there was only one radio station, people would be hemming and hawing all day long about what songs get played on that one and only radio station. As soon as you have 50,000 radio stations, are people concerned about what's being played on 97.5 XM radio in fucking Latvia? Fuck no, because you have 50,000 other channels you can choose between. If you lived in a country or a world as we now live, where there's the BBC One and nothing fucking else, people would debate endlessly what gets seen on that channel. And that's where the world we live in today, where, and every article posted right now is, how the hell is Elon going to comply with the impossible? You can't please both sides of the right and the left and critical race theory. What are you going to, you're silencing this person and not silencing that person? No, there ain't going to be none of that bullshit no more. There's going to be.
Let me ask you a question. Is this
Yes.
not the perfect isolation mechanism to isolate freedom of reach from freedom of speech? Because anybody can say anything on Twitter, but it will be filtered out at
Okay.
the end user level,
Okay.
not at the
I,
publishing
Precise.
level.
I think
Precise.
it's part of a phased. If you look at it as a phased approach, then this makes a lot of sense. You need to get everybody broadcasting first on the stage. Actually, now the people in China may not choose to tune into our stuff, and we may not choose at first to tune into theirs, but at least get it all out there and possible. And then when you choose, as Tyler says, I would love to tune into the Chinese or the Russian perspective, and maybe they'll do the same, and then maybe this is progress. So as you look at it as a phased approach, then I think it is. I do think it's
The
progress. So I think it
BBC
makes
just
sense.
played
Tyler,
Metallica. What could that? They just played 3 Metallica songs in a row. I'm in an uproar because now that's controlling my worldview. You are influencing everything, and then politicians want to get involved because they don't like Metallica. When you've got one radio station for the whole fucking planet, that's a huge, unreconcilable problem. And there isn't
Tyler,
an elegant solution. Yes, Francine, go ahead.
do you remember when Twitter was chronological? Because in the beginning it was,
Yes,
and
Yeah.
I th- and I think they changed it to
personalized.
to yeah, personalized, and that was where they got into trouble.
Correct.
So I like your idea of chronological and sorted out at the end user level,
Especially
because it does
because
take them out
they
of the
now
content
they
moderation
right,
business.
precisely, and because the head of the EU Commission just decided to tell BBC, "Hey, Elon Musk, now it's on you to tell us precisely how your algorithm works." He doesn't want to play that game. He would love to say, "Here's my algorithm. It's 0 lines of code. Pardon, it's about 3. It's called chronological. Whatever order the tweets come in, that's what we show." End of this. That's the default algorithm. Nothing more, nothing less. There's a whole separate menu, a section of functionality where people can tap into curators, and which are like radio stations, and how they want to perceive the world. And we have nothing to do with that. We enable people to do that. That's not our algorithm. We are no longer in the content business.
It's like
We
an algorithm a store.
Right. And because, by the way, now from a Section 230 standpoint, we have nothing to think about at all. We're a protocol of content that's endlessly flowing, like songs that get created by musicians. And what radio stations decide to play is totally up to them. That has nothing to do with us as a platform. So we now comply with the EU, easy peasy. And we now get to go into every market, no problem. We're back in Russia, we're in China, we're everywhere else. And oh, by the way, you want to send money, you want to buy something from China? Oh, well, there's this new cryptocurrency that will enable you to buy shit anytime, anywhere, from anywhere on the planet. And what do you know? We got the social commerce game that's now afoot in a very big way. They want to play a very big role in, and they have an opportunity to be the front runner in social commerce. That to me is the bigger play, and the way to do that is to be friendly with governments and even authoritarians who are going to want complete control of the algorithms. Fine, they have control of their radio stations and their TV channels. Let them have control of what people see on this Twitter platform as well. It is what it is in those countries. But I think the citizens of those countries will perceive it as a win that they now have access to a platform, even if it is curated. By the way, they had LinkedIn until a few months ago, just for those who don't know. But LinkedIn was finding it hard to curate the content, and the CCP was saying, "Hey, we're seeing stuff on LinkedIn that we don't want people to see. Remove all of this content." And LinkedIn was like, "This is becoming too much trouble for what it's worth." The solution is to do the opposite. It's instead of doing the endless blacklisting, which is impossible to do, you have to take the reverse approach and do the whitelisting and start from zero and add in and approve the people that want them to see. The CCP would be happy to build their own whitelisted algorithm version of Twitter of the content that they would allow their citizens to see of the channels or Twitter use accounts that they approve of, which they probably already know which ones they approve of, honestly. So let's see what happens. I imagine if it works that you'll see YouTube and Facebook. By the way, Facebook, Zuckerberg did one of the biggest displays of Chinese affection the world has ever seen when he visited Beijing and spoke fluent Mandarin, and was willing to do absolutely anything to appease the CCP to be in the market, but they only had one algorithm, and so I don't think he quite foresaw the option of, or wasn't willing to, anyways, let the CCP have their own version of Facebook in the way that you could ostensibly do in this Twitter example that I'm describing. Anyway, we've only covered the top
Dang it.
one story of today, and we have a whole lot of other stories.
Tyler, may I
Can
chime
I
in
throw in some
before we
really
close
quick
out?
thoughts?
Yes,
Which one?
So,
Please go ahead.
one
uh,
second. Pauline, go first, and then Belgum or whoever that was. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll be super fast. So on, because I have a couple notes. This was such a hot topic. So on the authentic, real human part, right? What's interesting is I think that's less about freedom of speech, but maybe more so how to maybe even add some accountability so that if there is fake news, at least it's attached to a person. So I think on the bot part, with the elections with Facebook or now Meta, I think that could have been a mechanism to try to address that, but there's so many variables of that. So that's one of them. And the other one that's interesting when it comes to CCP, whether there is benefit there, you learn more about behavior traits of people uncensored and censored, right? And you kind of think about it. If you know how uncensored people want it and think, couldn't you learn about how to better push out censored content, if that makes sense? Because people like me, that I'm Chinese, I'm outside of the country, and I kind of think about it that, if they could see how I'm consuming things and what I'm sharing, even about them, and when I re-enter their country, they'd be like, oh, someone with the mindset outside, this is the construct of how they're thinking. And then, maybe I can better cater news to target her so she thinks it's not censored, but it is, if that makes sense. And then for digital payments, what's I think funky about that is it could be a mechanism to incentivize the behavior you do want, right? So that's going to be a whole ball game itself. And in closing, if they do have a mix of algorithms, Tyler, TNATW algorithm, please.
Okay, for sure we would. Now, by the way, Begum, who wanted to jump in here, and I think maybe we've seen you once before, but for those who don't know, because there's 400 people in the
okay.
room and 390 of us meet here every day. And
Okay.
so you might be one of the new fish in the fishbowl at the moment, but just so you're aware, the rest of us all meet every day for many, many, many months now. So we're going to give you an opportunity to. We're curious to see what you have to say, Begum. Go ahead.
Hey, Tyler. Well, all your topics you are mentioning it. First of all, it is too important to understand. Media is not collapsed by the social media. It was already collapsed from the 1950. In the 1950s, it started, and it just let's not forget that. First economy newspaper of even France, they sold it in the 60s and 70s. So we need to understand media is always changing hands. And also, I'm talking about one of the actually about the book. It's really important to understand. It's written by the John Thompson and also Julia Cage. Julia Cage tells in her book, it's Saving Media. It is kind of like saving capitalism concept, but she is actually answering all these questions, how we can democratize media and without these one hands in the world. So it is important to understand to saving media there are other ways just within the crowdfunding. So there are new models within the crowdfunding. You can share your revenue with your readers, but also with the people who they are writing your news. So there are other ways to democratize all the media and the newspaper and the TV channels. Right now, I'm consulting for the media company. It has TV channels, it has newspaper, everything. All the people in Turkey, they are taking their news from us, and we are aware about it. And all these media should close to the media, but it is the why media is exists. It exists because of the governments, because we need that power. Let's say, right? But let's not forget that Elon Musk doesn't need Twitter because of the commercial revenues of the Twitter. He needs that because he is not doing Tesla. He is doing Tesla because of the data on there. And there are a lot of cameras on those Teslas. And think about that, how it is powerful when you compare that. So he needed all these data on the Twitter. And he has rights, I do believe that, if you want a more power on there. So we need to understand, I guess, in the media side, also in the other side, let's say in the social media and all the other places, we need to understand data is the real value. So all these companies trying to collecting those data. That's why Elon Musk actually bought the Twitter. And I don't believe that there's going to be free speech on there, or he is going to be carry that flag on the Twitter. I don't think at all, but I'm not his enemies. And let's not forget also last thing is I'm going to say, left or right doesn't matter. All those things also created by that power. Because as an art historian, also as a, let's say, philosophers, we write all these narratives of the society. And if society, if the government wants more power, should accept that he needs two different groups or the enemies to continue to his power. So yeah, they're from me, Tyler, but there are definitely ways to reducing of this power in the our media and the TV channels and the our ways. And this media is not going to control anymore the minds, because all those people, more than 50% of the populations, they are already not trusting any media, whether it's on social media, doesn't matter, or the TV channels and the newspapers. So we are already aware about that. There's no meaning of getting all this news from the TVs. So what we need new models to democratize media, but as well our daily lives. And you are definitely right. Cryptocurrency is going to give more power to those hands, because they will see every transaction on it. And that's why China made their own government cryptocurrencies. Yeah, these are from me, Tyler. Let's not be that much. I mean, I understand you, but I always prefer to stay in the optimist side, because I do believe still there are other ways to reduce all this power.
Okay, thank you for that, Bex. So, can we go
Can I
into
say just very quickly, Tyler?
1 minute? Go ahead, Messi.
It's just it really makes me sad even to hear you say that, Zuckerberg was ready to do anything to get into that market. It's so sad. These are not as a person whose parents lived through a system like Russia and China, and many people died and disappeared, including my own father and family members. These are rich people. They don't really need to do things like this. It's very sad to hear that they would do anything, even being the richest person in the world, to get into a big market. So that's all. I'm done speaking.
Okay, so final thoughts on the the future of Twitter, the recent past, present, and future of Twitter.
I just want to highlight the fact that if, in fact, they succeed in isolating reach from free speech, this will be one of the biggest milestones in social media.
Right. And there's an elegant solution on the horizon which it solves some of their biggest headaches, especially now with these new EU rules that force them to be transparent about their algorithm. And leading the EU commissioner to even jump on the soapbox to remind Elon Musk personally that they have to comply with this new ruling that they just passed over the weekend. And Jack Dorsey speaking in a bit of code, as he's known to do, in responding to Elon Musk, saying people should be able to choose their own algorithms. And there was one other interesting detail in all of that. We'll probably have to save it for
Tyler,
tomorrow. Yes.
we have an old audience in
See
the, I
that.
mean,
So are you seeing who
the
I'm
lady in
seeing?
blue.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, what a special treat. Sonali is back at Tech News Around the World.
Welcome back,
Sonali,
Sonali.
welcome back, Sonali. It's great to see you. I'm going to play the clap just for Sonali. For those who don't know, Sonali's really one of the OG tech newsers. So I'm going to go ahead and invite Sonali up and see if she has some thoughts on Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey and the Twitter purchase. Because there's a lot of interesting implications that she might have some interesting thoughts on this that we might have
By the
missed.
way, while we wait, Tyler, if we're ever building arguments on Tesla and how much data they collect, they don't upload very much video that those cars collect at all. I've been watching what my car uploads. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the video it captures. Most of it never goes anywhere near Tesla.
So Brad Stone at Bloomberg, while we're waiting for Sonali, his article for Bloomberg says Elon Musk's Twitter bid is a political takeover to control one of the world's largest megaphones and impose his libertarianism on moderation and misinformation, basically implying that there's one algorithm and that he's going to control it, and that's why he paid $45 billion to control this one and only algorithm. Come on. Elon Musk says he wants to improve Twitter by making the algorithms open source to increase trust, defeating the spam bots and authenticating of all humans. Well, that works very compatibly if you have endless stream of different algorithms that enable people to make algorithms. Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal and Chairman Bret Taylor told employees that the company will keep operating as usual. According to sources, the deal could take up to 6 months. Elon is buying Twitter to protect his ability to tweet, which is vital to his business interests, combating the SEC and because Tesla stock. So it seems like journalists have a hard time understanding the possibility that there could be a multiple algorithm universe.
It's
Trump
like
said,
he gets rid of the marketing department and buys Twitter instead. Classic Elon.
Trump says that regardless of Elon Musk's Twitter purchase, I'm not going on Twitter. I'm going to stay on Truth, whose stock closed down 13% on Monday. And the EU Market Commissioner warns Elon Musk that Twitter must follow the new Digital Services Act rules or face fines or even a ban in the EU if he isn't completely transparent about the Twitter algorithm, because that's the new rule. And he's going to say, checkmate, here it is. It's called chronological. You follow people. We show them to you in the order that they tweet. It's very simple. People have ideas. They share them on Twitter. We rank them algorithm. We send them to you in the order that the people you follow have their ideas and share them on Twitter. We have no influence whatsoever in any kind of moderation at all, in any shape, way, or form with content. We are completely wiping our hands clean of the content business. We are not in the content business. And in doing so, we can allow everybody on the platform. We don't need to be worried about who's saying what or saying what, because you decide if you're seeing their stuff or not us. We have nothing to do with that. We are like a
This is going
telephone
to be more
company.
world changing. This is going to be more world changing than copy and paste. This is ridiculous.
So they don't want to be in the game of moderating who gets shadow banned and suspended. Do you know how much time and how many? I would love to know how many team members Twitter has dealing with shadow bans, suspending of accounts, policing Twitter as they do. When it's endless. They've got the Twitter Blue system where they're even trying to crowdsource it now, so regular non-Twitter employees can tell on somebody when they're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing, and that gets lifted up to accounts, and that whole crazy game of human curation of content. By the way, Facebook is spending billions of dollars a year doing content moderation. I imagine Twitter might be as well, and hundreds of team members, at
I think
least, at
1,500
least.
people. 1,500 people for Twitter content moderators.
Do we know that for a fact? 1,500. Eric,
Yeah,
do you
I
have
believe that it was here. Yeah.
send me any evidence of that? I would love to see that, because you could toss those people out the window and their salaries.
Speaking of
And
tossing
by the way,
people out
one
the
other point.
window,
I want to give Ken some credit, because he's correct, I think, in his calculation that Twitter will need to do a subscription layer to finance everything. I think he's probably right about that. And I think Elon had said that they'll have a subscription layer of, yeah, why not have some really cool products and features that will be available to people who are willing to pay, whatever, $2, $3, $4, $5 a month, whatever it is. So, and people might even pay to be what do you call it, verified or whatnot. Who knows? There's a whole bunch of interesting things. So, can we get now into the non-Twitter headlines that we have for today? I think we can. And as
Oh
as
my,
as
we
per,
already
Yay.
did the first one.
here we go. Here we go. Wall Street Journal: Fidelity will let retirement savers put Bitcoin into their 401k accounts starting later in 2022. The first major retirement plan provider to do so. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ken or Ben or others. This could be quite big if people.
Yeah, Tyler, I thought this was going to be massive. I actually am surprised that Bitcoin's not up dramatically today.
Right,
In fact, I think it's actually trading lower. This shocks me.
right,
So I really don't understand it. Maybe Ben's got an explanation. I would tell you, though, if this was a stock, and it's not a stock, but if this was a stock that just had a blowout quarter and it was trading lower, and unless there was some other market mechanism going on, it would concern me that there's something I'm not seeing.
right.
So I'm so
Yeah,
anyway.
if you can find a replay of Michael Saylor's interview on Squawk this morning, he addressed this issue really elegantly.
Well, if the others follow suit, then what you have is a significant percentage of everybody's savings get, some small percentage. It doesn't need to be much. If everybody put 1% of their savings into Bitcoin, holy shit, uh, that's a lot. That's a ton of a lot. So CZ over at Binance, which is still regarded as the largest exchange, tweeted saying probably nothing. That's the entirety of the tweet, and that's how you know that this is something. I agree with Ken. Like, this is potentially quite big, and if the others follow suit in enabling people to put holdings in of their 401k in Bitcoin, that could put a lot of upward pressure on the price of Bitcoin.
Hey
Um,
Tyler,
yeah,
in other currency type of news, though, because we discussed it yesterday and it ties into this, I just wanted to mention. I know you'd be interested in this. The Japanese yen just hit a 20-year low with the dollar. So when we were talking about, the dollar and the printing presses and all of that, I mean, the dollar is still trading well versus against other fiats, which is interesting. And anyway, so I just wanted to to mention that anyway.
okay. I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing it trading at 127.
Yeah, but
And
I'm told there's stories out there that that's a 20-year low. So everyone, I mean,
no,
no,
I've traded the dollar versus the yen since '92.
I'll
Uh,
get you the story. I'll get you the
Ooh.
story, then, and you can
the,
tell me it's wrong.
it is wrong, because in 2012 it went down to it was at an all-time high of 78. I see what you're getting at. Okay, it's currently at 127, which is historically very high. The last time it was at 127-ish was 2002. You're right. That is 20 years ago. It's just one of those things, like when you remember that Nirvana's Nevermind was 20 years ago. That was a long time ago, 2002, that it was at this, around this level. It was at 120. It was close to this in 2007 and it got close again in 2015, but it just spiked above those previous spikes of 2015, 2001. It's not yet as high as 1998, where it got up to 144. And by the way, for those who don't know, as somebody who's been trading the yen dollar for a long time, the reason I love trading the yen dollar is because both countries have a very strong interest in stopping the yen from going much higher than where it is now at 120, or call it lower, weaker, getting any weaker than it is now, because of the amount of trade that goes on between the two countries. When you have both governments and the entire banking systems and all of the mega conglomerates of both countries, all parties involved, don't want the yen to get weaker than what it is now. So that puts incredible pressure for it to go the other way eventually. It takes time. Currency and Forex trading is a time-based thing. You can scalp it if you want, but if you go at some point, they'll even put in policies in place to force it to go the other direction. So you can keep that in mind, that at some point the yen will go lower than where it is now, or call it stronger, or it'll get less weak than where it is now at 127. Because they like the homeostasis for the yen, I would say, is around 105 historically, which is where both
That
countries. Yes.
depends on yield curve
Sure.
control. It's all
Sure.
about yield curve.
Sure. Okay, so next big story is that a hacker stole 91 NFTs worth about $2.8 million through a phishing attack, compromising Bored Ape Yacht Club's Instagram account and promoting a malicious link inside of the Bored Ape Yacht Club Instagram account. So the hacker stole 91 NFTs from users. Okay. Next,
Therefore showing the weakest link is the human. It's always just a phishing attack like John Podesta losing, getting hacked.
Or Bezos. Decentralized exchange infrastructure provider called OX Labs raises $70 million with participation from OpenSea and Coinbase and others. Ben Thompson, who does the tech blog Stratechery, has a post about Amazon's Buy with Prime will make it difficult for Shopify to get its own shipping solution to scale by deepening Amazon's nearly impregnable moat in logistics. And it's right on time for him to write this piece, because Amazon's now addressing the Shopify threat very head on. Because what Shopify was doing very brilliantly was enabling people to sell stuff on their own, rather than forcing them to sell stuff on Shopify.com like Amazon kind of does. If you want to sell on Amazon, you sell it on Amazon, and people find it on Amazon rather than on your website and what have you, which is what Shopify was enabling you to do. And now Amazon says, okay, enough's enough. We can't risk having Shopify eat our lunch and kick our ass. So we got to get into the game of letting people sell their own products on their own pages, and we empower that, similar to how YouTube allows you to upload your own content, but show it on your own page. You don't have to go to YouTube to view the content. You can view the content wherever the content creator wants you to see it. Well, wouldn't that be nice if you could sell stuff wherever you wanted the buyer to see it, like on your own web page? And that's what Shopify was doing. They were starting to gain a whole lot of market share. Amazon correctly analyzed that as a threat and are now reacting very strongly, and as they should do. They're not stupid. They're in it to win it. So the next one's from Vice. Emails reveal how some police officers have become super fans of autonomous drone company called Skydio and regularly help to sell or promote its products to colleagues. Right, and for some reason, Vice likes to write articles about police technology. And this is indeed a technology that police like to use. It's a little drone, which we now know was used in the Kyle Rittenhouse case and was actually one of the most deciding, revealing pieces of evidence, was the drone footage in that example. When police do marketing for surveillance tech companies, a drone company called Skydio has managed to get autonomous drones into dozens of police departments by turning cops into their biggest fans. Yes, Ring did exactly the same thing. If you that this is no different than any industry except that they're police. So if you build a product that police like and incentivize them to be give them what do we call a commission or a kickback of some kind, and Ring did this, and they, but I don't know that Vice has much of an issue with Ring cameras doing this. But they do have an issue with drones doing that. Nicholas, is this? I could see you taking either side of this argument. Is this the publication trying to spread fear, or is this? Do they have a legitimate point?
I think that the issue here is just about the blending of the public and the private domain. That's really the issue.
Well said.
And if one can get the government to work for you, then the question is, will they fail to regulate you? So the
Right.
reason why you keep separation between church and state,
yes, well said.
right? You have a conflict of interest, and that's the reason why you shouldn't be able to do this. It's just that simple.
Yes, that's why politicians.
Tell it.
Yeah, Jay.
Yeah. Tell it. This is exactly the field on application where a decentralized internet could beat decentralized one. So if you just, I think we also cover a story, a startup who is incentivizing people to record, to install a dash cam on their car and put that feed into. So this is, if police want to do it, so we can also do it. So we might have to, so the
Great point.
decentralized internet might have to pick their battle.
So
Not
Darman,
they just, yeah.
would you like to start a dash camera company where we give them away for free to people in exchange for the data or the video footage? Is the tech is
You
the
don't need to. You don't need to give it away for free. You can just enable people to publish it in a way that is verified and private, and that you can then use Jack's genius idea, which isn't Jack's genius idea, but you can just then run AI over the data if it's the what do they call it? The not the fountainhead. The what do they used to call the Twitter feed? It wasn't called the Fountainhead. It was called the Fire Hose. That's right. It should be called the Fountainhead now. That was my Ayn Rand delusion. That fire hose
the fire hose.
The fire hose can be switched on and by everybody, and therefore you don't necessarily even need to compensate. You don't need to compensate them for the camera. You just say, put it on and publish it to your self-sovereign identity and have attestations to that information, and you can have it fully private yet provable. And that is exactly what the decentralized internet is going to enable.
Because interestingly, in the Vice article, the drones are free. It's a free drone program. Police officers have acted as Skydio's boosters, participating in marketing stunts, emailing each other about the free drone programs, providing space and officers to shoot Skydio demos, strategizing, etc. So, where's the free? Yeah. So, in some sense, they figured out a clever way. If you can give people free kit in exchange for valuable lead generation,
I think the best thing that one can do is give away free mobile phones on an open system. That would be, really the big opportunity.
Okay, next story is we cover Amazon emails. Oh, we got that one. Now it's a whole bunch of fundraising announcements as usual. Any particularly interesting ones? A company called Hour One, Hour, like the time, Hour One, lets businesses use AI to create human-led video and full-fledged avatars for the workplace. Raises $20 million. Australia's competition watchdog is suing Uber and seeks a $26 million Australian dollar fine after Uber admitted to misleading users about ride fare estimates and cancellation fees. And the Department of Defense is hiring Lyft's head of machine learning as the Pentagon's first chief digital and AI officer. That's kind of interesting. And hackers have attacked 3 German wind energy companies since Russia's war in Ukraine, shutting down more than 2,000 wind turbines, remote control systems, etc. And Bloomberg says they have sources that SoftBank's stricter investment criteria has led to tepid continued support for some cash-strapped startups it has backed, including camera startup called Light. Okay, so those are your big, boring corporate
So
media headlines.
bears noting that attacking the wind turbines means forcing Europe to burn more natural gas. And where do they get that? And why is that important right now?
Great point, Ellie. Thank you for the additional context there. Yeah, indeed, they have a little. It makes it all that much harder to figure out who these hackers could be. um, so the tweets that people have been tweeting. Oh, by the way, the top story now has become from Bloomberg, highlighting the importance of Tesla's Chinese market and operations. Jeff Bezos asks in a tweet if China has gained a bit of a leverage over Twitter, and yeah, and then leading somebody named @Jason to say, "Hey Jeff Bezos, what percentage of goods sold on Amazon originate in China?" And what, and then showing some other, yeah.
Hey, Tyler, can I just interject something that's on kind of breaking news here? That I mean, as a global, I mean, even though it's not the bellwether it used to be, General Electric reported today, and the stock, even though they beat their numbers, is down 12% because of guidance, and I think that probably tells you that the world might be heading into a recession if GE is down 12% in a day. So I
I
just
just
want to.
can't wait to see that collateral call on Mr. Musk. I just cannot wait for it.
It's
Interesting.
coming.
So Jeff clarifies. First, he tweets out saying, "Did the Chinese government just gain a bit of leverage over the town square, aka Twitter?" And then he says, "My own answer to this question is probably not." Well, then that's quite shady of you to propose a question that you imply the opposite answer to. My own answer to the question is probably not. The more likely outcome in this regard is complexity in China for Tesla rather than censorship at Twitter. Well, again, you're implying that there's only one algorithm.
If I was a Tesla shareholder, I would be so worried about this. And if I was a Musk fan, I would be so extremely worried about this. It's we're in a market that's declining rapidly. We're in a rising environment where demand is being tamped down on purpose because that's the only way, given the supply shocks we've got in the commodity sector and the supply shocks we've got coming through the bond markets. Um, it's got like if the stock goes down in value, if the air comes out of that market and people start to looking at profitability as opposed to hype, it could be extremely bad for those Tesla shareholders to have a massive overhang of that stock that would be liquidated or held by financial intermediaries if it goes wrong. And I don't see how he's going to make Twitter profitable anytime soon. I think Ken has made this point, previously. It's an extremely risky move. He's like almost well. Let's see if the market gets worse sooner than later. He might bail on the deal altogether, which I think is Ken's view.
Honestly, I think it's not economics, it's geopolitics that's driving this. And
What is my view, by the way, when we're done with this? Because I didn't hear all of it, but go ahead.
we know that there are some major investment banking firms involved, but we don't know who's behind whose money they are using.
Are you suggesting like the Twitter deal could fall apart because of the markets, Nicholas?
Yeah, basically, I was paraphrasing that if we're going into headwinds where you've got rising interest rates, you've got margined uh, equity, and if I was a Tesla shareholder, I would be nervous that my Tesla position is going to be adversely affected
Oh, I
by
agree with that.
an
Yes, I
over
didn't know.
levered
I didn't know
Musk.
we spoke about that, but I agree with that. Yes.
We didn't. I interpolated it from your thought.
Hmm.
My own opinion is that it has very little likelihood of going through.
Well, I would have said yesterday. I thought it had a high degree of going through. By the way, we didn't discuss the debt financing because I didn't want to elongate what was already, I thought, a conversation that went on too long. So I just wanted to move off the Twitter thing. But very quickly, the debt financing was actually disclosed. So Elon's going to take like a $12.5 million margin loan. So that's the point that Nicholas is making in terms of the value of billion, excuse me, right? Billion with a B, right? Okay, collateral. It's hard to think in those terms sometimes. Okay, because I don't have billions. Um, but the other one is like another 12 and a half from Morgan Stanley, which they're probably going to syndicate out. Um, and so it's just a question on that piece. It just may be a question of what the interest cost is. But that's why I had told some people, I know Tyler, some others, that I thought there's going to need to be a subscription model to service this debt because 25 billion, even if it's at 4%, is like just a rough numbers, right? You got a billion, right? It's $1 billion in interest cost annually. Twitter's never generated even $1 billion in EBITDA, even in its peak year. Okay, so they're going to have to do something. I don't think it needs to be a massive subscription. I kind of like played around with some numbers and said, even if they only charge $10 a year, not a month, but a year, so much cheaper than Netflix, and even if that gives them a 50% attrition rate and they lose, half their people, that would still generate $1 billion a year. So I think you're going to see some really, really modest subscription number. Okay, because that would still, given their user base, even with attrition, generate like enough money to cover the debt service. So that's my thesis on that.
Okay. Okay, the tweets. The first tweet I have is from Bibi that Facebook's parent company Meta is going to open its first physical retail store. The new store in California will display VR headsets and smart glasses and whatnot, obviously, as they need to get Uncle Joey and Aunt Betty testing out the metaverse so that they can get excited and jump on board because nobody's getting excited about something they've never experienced. And the next one's also from BB from CNBC. That the threat of nuclear war is real, according to top Russian official. UN chief is traveling to Moscow to meet with Putin. Russia has said that the threat of nuclear war is, quote, very, very significant. And the next one is from who? Who's this? Oh, it's the Elon Musk thinks Twitter's algorithms should be public. The next
Let's just
is
be clear on that saber rattling. It's
yeah.
the only time that someone's going to say that is when they are being perceived as losing and being weak. So the louder they shout about the fear mongering, the more likely it is that they're actually teetering.
And I really wonder, in time, was that after Defense Secretary Austin made the comment about weakening Russian military power? Because that would, if so, that's an important tell.
Right. Valerie found the next one that North Korean hackers are targeting journalists with a new malware called Gold Backdoor. North Korean state-sponsored hackers known as APT-37 have been discovered targeting journalists specializing in the DPRK with a novel malware strain because authoritarian regimes like to control narratives. Give them their own algorithm, and then we could have North Korea on Twitter. That would be fantastic. I would follow a lot of people from North Korea. The problem is, how would North Korea control the people from sharing their idea and letting me see their ideas? That's where it gets complicated, of course. The next is
We joke that North Korea has the so-called physical control even over COVID. So if you have COVID or like we're asked you, then it's zero COVID then. So that then something will happen if they have Twitter, something like that.
the U.S. government grants academics $12 million to develop cyber attack defense tools. The U.S. Department of Energy, the DOE, has announced that it will provide $12 million in funding to 6 university teams to develop defense and mitigation tools to protect the power grid. Okay, right. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the next is, what a weird coincidence. A double solar flare just triggered radio blackouts all over Asia and Australia. and that's a bit of a problem. Indeed, solar flares and the radiation that they cause can wipe out radio and potentially at higher levels, even satellites, and even at higher levels, even electricity grids. And that's just your daily reminder to get your own energy under control.
And
The
if it were to wipe out the grid, it wouldn't be just like a bad power failure. It would blow transformers, and it would take 6 months to get even three-quarters of the grid back up.
Are there any options that if this were to happen, that we can still stay connected though? Because it seems like it would just blow everything out.
I think that was for you, El.
It's, I mean, well, yes, but we wouldn't be rebuilding from scratch, but we would probably be asking at points along the way whether that would be better.
I
So we're
think it
back to
depends
sending
how the
letters.
it depends how the grid's designed. I mean, I've looked recently at how our local grid here is, and there's a lot of protections against that sort of thing. We have spark gaps that the lines will earth down to ground bypassing the transformer. It really depends how well designed it is. UK has pretty decent electrical standards, but I from what I've seen, a big solar flare wouldn't do too much damage to this infrastructure here. But that's just one country.
What you're talking about, though, is propagating it. If the flux is large enough, within each isolated section, stuff would get blown out.
Ah,
Not if you've seen these massive metal box transformers surrounded in oil. I don't think it's getting in there. The flux. It's a massive, heavy metal box.
so the UK has dismissed.
And acting as an antenna.
We'll
Okay,
back channel about it, Eli.
okay. So Reuters is reporting that the UK British Armed Force Minister James Heappey said on Tuesday he did not think there was an imminent threat of escalation in war with Russia, dismissing the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's bravado, quote unquote, that there's no imminent threat of escalation in Ukraine in a nuclear sense. So they're calling his bluff, essentially. And the next one is from Tomoko, that Japan's Shionogi says that COVID-19 pill in Japan shows rapid clearance of the virus. And Reuters is reporting that they hope this clearance also somehow support easing long COVID soon. An experimental treatment from Shionogi and Company Limited has shown rapid clearance of the virus that causes COVID-19 according to new data. That would be lovely.
Do you have a link to that?
I just retweeted it from the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW.
Great.
And the next one is from Katerina, that Facebook plans to open its first retail store. We covered that one because they need to get your aunt and uncle and grandparents into the metaverse, and they got to try it before they buy it. The next is also from Katerina. Will advertisers flee a free speech Twitter? New Twitter owner Elon Musk has emphasized his belief that free speech is critical to Twitter's future, even noting in the press release, but how will advertisers feel about a free speech Twitter? Because somebody could say some hurtful stuff. And of course, if you've been listening to Tech News all day today, then you know the answer to that question.
And if I might, the free speech is great, right? And the different gradations of what speech is, but truth, right? The transparency. Like when we were talking about the algorithms, that's certainly going to be something that can really help people with reach. But also, just if they can do something on the, if Elon can do something on the interface to really help users get some level of graded score of how truthful, how untruthful something might be. I think that would be a really huge win for turning the ship on a lot of this social media and some of the problems we've been dealing with.
A centralized source of truth sounds not like a good idea. The way that it resolves is using attestation frameworks, and you need full privacy, which means you need zero knowledge proofs in order to do that. Otherwise, people will never be honest. Privacy is essential to elections because if your choices are exposed, then those choices will be augmented through peer pressure and people with large sticks.
But it depends, right? It depends on the
You got cut out, David.
scientists were privately, like, if no one, if they're all anonymous or whatever and anonymized, but they have a strong belief in climate in the climate change, right? So I think the context is crucial there, and for who you vote for, maybe fine as a use case possibly, but there are a whole, I would suspect the majority of what comes out of our mouth, we would like to just get a sense that, hey, that's opinion or it's based on some fact. Here's the fact that they're referencing. Oh, that's a bullshit source. So hey, that source is
All truth
often right.
is arrived. All truth is arrived at through social consensus, and social consensus is influenced by mimetic uh, power and by a need for the conservation of energy and the conservation of thought, and therefore people follow my leader. Monkey see, monkey do. That is the way that evolution works, and so the only way to solve this is to have attestation frameworks, because otherwise you have a problem, which is who knows, who decides, and who decides who decides. And the only way you can resolve this is not to have Elon do it and not to have centralized, is that you have attestation frameworks that enable you to discern who is an expert on the environment, in your case David, and David has attestations from a variety of authorities, and those authorities have attestations from authorities, and through that you get to build an information field, and that information field needs to be publicly owned. If not, you are not free, because you will have no way to determine the truth, because truth is come to through social consensus.
So I love this, but so social. So there are two things. I see a veneer of who we are, right? The representation of who we are. It's not us. Like, I get the privacy piece to it. Don't agree completely that that's always going to be the way to resolve. I think that social truth is popularity, right? That's almost the definition of popularity. What I'm talking about, and in human history, we're talking about fire is hot, you will burn your finger, right? So I agree that there's going to be some role of privacy with your framework you're describing in certain contexts. But what we need is kind of a closed loop with Fargan reality of like the hard scientific truths, whether it's climate or
Okay,
good
but in every
medical
scientific breakthrough, as you know, has been caused as a cosmic joke. People thought that it was the end of physics with Newton, and then you have Einstein, Bohr, and Bohm. People thought it was the end of understanding the human with Watson and Crick and the DNA project, and it turns out that we were missing the data from the proteins and we were missing the data from the RNA, and furthermore, we have yet to discover the axion, which is and quantum gravity. So there is no way to exactly nail down what you want to nail down. The consensus until the breakthrough is the social consensus, and then truth is updated. There is an a priori that humans have. That's how machine learning works. That's how Bayesian probabilities work. You have a guess, and then you score the guess against the posterior, the result. That is how we work as humans. What we need to do is populate an information field with verifiable information, and from that, we will come to consensus. This is the miracle that is about to be delivered to the decentralized world.
I think that what you're describing is a useful tool to inform the real truth. And what I mean by that is, Newton, as an example, he was fighting against the church. I think I'm not the history PhD or
You're
anything like
thinking
that.
Galileo.
Yeah, well, okay, sorry. But my point is, like, especially as we were going through COVID, and all these things, from the science perspective, the research, in fact, I would argue, as I have in many of these rooms over the past couple of years, is one of the biggest things that we've lost is the credibility um, of our public health leadership, right? So we need to recultivate and reinvigorate a respect for good science and we need to do a much better
Who
job.
decides what good science is, David? Who decides?
Absolutely.
I can tell you who decides. There is as a cancer survivor, the network of research hospitals doing evidence based research are the people who friggin' decide. It's not some little Google page by Joe Schmo who has a web page and something came out of his.
I think you're
Yeah.
misreading the scales, right? No one's disagreeing with you that authorities, which is why you have duly authorized authorities who have degrees and everything else. No one is arguing. I'm definitely not arguing against you on that. What I'm trying to show is that there is social consensus that believes in Newtonian physics. There's social consensus that is interested in DNA, and you get the consensus of people that have had cancer will go for cancer treatment and will give you an accurate read as to the success of a treatment or not, right? And so that's what I mean by social consensus. Not that we are, this is happening on Twitter. It's that you need quality data. You need, or think of it the other way, garbage in, garbage out. So if you can avoid the garbage, and the only way you can do this is by enabling people to have privacy, and that point about privacy is that we have this new technology that enables you to have provable information that is true, that you do not have to disclose the underlying data. That is the miracle of zero knowledge proofs. That is what it enables. Now, if you can imagine
I'm
that
sorry, but we have offshore places where people enjoy child pornography and all kinds of bullshit, cutting people heads off because they have privacy. That is the assumption that the true selves of humans is good, which is not true. We do whatever we need to do to be the fittest in our niche. And this is sometimes good and a lot of times really, really bad. We have
and this is why we
met
have a system of laws.
worst and best. Well, yeah, but if you have total privacy, you escape laws, and there are many public research for many years that show in systems where there's no law, where nothing bad can happen to you, people do terrible things. You can see this, and studies were done in situations where, for example, a country went through law and it's kind of in the in between state, but the military doesn't really have power anymore and no one else. What happens there? Women get raped. It's horrific what happens in those states. And this is because you think nobody will track what you are going to do. There's no eye watching you. And we humans, I agree, we should have freedom and privacy and all this crap. But for minorities, weaker people in our society, this turns into total brutal bullshit treatment. And this is the ideology of Bertolt Brecht that you probably have, but data shows otherwise. I'm sorry.
And the other way around this, rather than complete privacy, is super radical transparency. And although, for example, everybody could see how you vote, well, everybody else can also see, or everybody can also see, if somebody is trying to coerce you because of that.
I just think philosophically, Katerina, you have a different view of the emergent features of morality. I believe that
It's data
actually,
based. I'm sorry, this is just data based on large scale studies in
I,
situation of
I,
war and situation where
yeah,
people
situations of
don't
war, but
have
we're not talking
laws.
about, I'm talking about evolution. If we're talking about at this level, the emergent feature is that we have evolved systems of law, etc., to preserve these rights so that we can have an accurate read on reality. And your objection or your belief that people are bad is something that I just take issue with. I believe that people treat people in the way that they would like to be treated if they have not suffered some form of trauma
You
that
think so?
forces
So
them
walk as
forces
a
them to
woman
misbehave.
in a bar, in a place where know they can treat you like shit. Look like an illegal immigrant as a woman in a Trump bar where it's full of drunk males. where they know whatever they do, and if the police comes, they won't care and
But that's
won't give a shit.
legislating by exception. You know,
No,
if
that's
you
not
walk
an
into
exception. That's
if you
the
walk into
rule.
the 95% of people that are not like that, you won't
No,
have that
no,
response.
No, that's the
You,
no.
you,
rule.
I
You
agree with
can
Katarina.
read
I
books
totally
and
agree.
studies about this. That
Yeah,
whenever
Yeah,
there's
no.
Katerina,
no
you
law
could have
enforcement,
easily said,
people go
rather
to
than a
shit.
Trump bar, you could have said an Anthony Weiner bar. You know, somebody on the left who does.
But
That's right.
look, I think, Nicholas, you said it precisely. 95% of the people can be good 95% of the time, right? That leaves a lot of room for a lot of really problematic things to happen.
And so the question is, do you want total surveillance? And who decides what is, what's what? That's the choice that you're going to have in the future. Or you have the privacy, and we evolve our behaviors. Because at the end of the day, every male has also got a mother, and the mothers do shape their children as well. And so I think we need to understand that we are a species, and that we need to evolve. And the way we evolve is by empowering ourselves and educating ourselves and using the information to update our priors, because most people will agree that the golden rule, or at the very least the silver rule, is the way that we've evolved to this point. And we have evolved democracies and separation of powers and legal structures to assist our societies in growing. And what we need to do, and what we've lost, is our ability to elect good leaders, because our politics has become corrupted by capitalism, as was warned back in 1776 by Adam Smith. And so this is the evolution we're going through. But abandoning our hard-won freedoms because we're afraid of the edge cases is really the route to autocracy.
Yeah,
The
but
It's
the
not
Nicholas,
the role.
we've
even
never really had true capitalism.
public
Come on.
studies of also male versus female human behavior and education. Please look at all these social studies that were performed mainly in Europe and Germany, where
Change
people
it, Katerina, change it.
education, where you had no rules in education settings. You had places where you had no rules and no labeling of male or female, and everyone could do what they wanted. Children from nice, very hippie, nice people. What they saw was that the social structures and the violence between kids, and especially male kids versus the female kids, was even worse than in a setting where you had all these rules. You can read up on this. It's really depressing. I agree. I would love that humans are great and nice and wonderful. But they are just all the studies that were done already in the 50s, 60s, 70s from people that wanted this revolution, okay, of we are all hippies and we are all great. That data told them otherwise. And that's the thing we just have to cope with. It doesn't
Why
help
does
to
it
have
have
a
to be in one
rose
extreme
rose
or the other,
to
Katerina? Why
have
can't we
like
just
a
update
pink.
our priors?
It doesn't help to have a pink sunglass on. That doesn't help us cope with actual reality. I know freedom is great, but total lack of tracking of what people are doing also doesn't work. It won't protect minorities. We are animals. Animals want to be the strongest at some point.
Let's just move on. I don't understand, Kat. I don't know what point is Katerina. What are you trying to
Well,
make? I mean,
okay,
I think we started this about truth.
let me just kind of make a point. There's freedom, but without accountability and responsibility going along with that freedom, you can have people horribly abusing those freedoms or other people. On the other hand, if you have a situation where there's freedom, but there's also accountability, that really, changes, that really moderates anybody's, bestial tendencies if they have them. But the bottom line is you have to know who is doing what. So total privacy breaks that.
I would like to just propose the following, which is, going back a few decades, people were less skeptical of government generally. There's a lot that we've learned about how life was back then, that really gets us to really distrust, and the distrust has exploded over the past generation plus. If you look at how, and I'll call it crony capitalism, because there's different flavors of capitalism, and that's a much different kind of a conversation, much bigger conversation. But transparency and trust is something that we need to cultivate quite a bit. Privacy has become a bigger issue because of the crony capitalism and how our privacy has been taken from us, completely taken from us by corporate interests, right? So that totally agree on so many parts of that, but it is, Katerina brings up some really important points for the whole 95% of us that are not, that largely for the most part kind of sort of usually follow the laws, right? It might be a little silly, but transparency is, I think, and privacy.
I just want to say I agree with you, and this is a red herring saying that total privacy creates this lawlessness. It doesn't. You can still have the requirement for compliance with the laws of the land. That can be anti-money laundering, terrorist financing, child protection, all of that stuff. It comes because you are required to be in compliance by the law, and therefore you can, when I say privacy, it means that you can prove something, but you don't have to compromise the underlying data. And that underlying data doesn't have to be stored in a central repository of government data where they have total surveillance. That's the point. There is a middle ground, and it comes through attestations by ensuring compliance and ensuring that the people can provide information that is duly required and duly authorized, like a driving license, etc. And through that, you will have a very strong picture of where they are, whether they've been, that you have all the same opportunities to track down bad people and to use the law. It is a red herring when people say, oh, privacy is going to unleash wild behaviors. It doesn't need to. That is a falsehood born of not having enough information and knowledge.
And Nicholas, I
Nicholas,
will I will say that you have opened my eyes to the importance of privacy in that manner, and I'm in agreement with you. I would say also, however, that it is a false herring to blame everything on capitalism. And I think the problem is people don't understand we haven't had it in well over 100 years. And they also, words have meaning. So the definition from Ayn Rand, which I think is the best definition of capitalism, and hear me out, Nicholas, is that capitalism is a social system based on the recognition of individual rights, including property rights, where all property is privately owned. And we have not had that. And the fact that we have so many centralized systems has corrupted that definition and taken us to something else that is not capitalism. So if I would think the privacy that projects that you're working on that are decentralized and all the things, the great things that you mentioned, that will actually help us to get to true capitalism. I think it is just as much a red herring to blame things on capital.
I think to the
I
point
don't.
of David saying the diminishing trust on governments and authorities, I would say the following, that over the years, governments are doing much more to communicate with people. Just imagine 20 years back, we did not have so many of your representative on Twitter. And the count of, if you go and look into the data itself, the number of briefings in a week, 20 years back, compare those with today, it's you would clearly get the picture that governments across the boards are doing, at least in the democracies, are doing much more than before. So the problem statement is, even after governments doing so much to pass on and increase the transparencies, why that the trust is going down? Uh, there could be a couple of reasons that even government doesn't know what, that even the government representative doesn't know what's happening there. So there could be the one of the factors. But I believe there are so many different sources of information people have these days, and they are so convincing and so personalized than a government briefing that people tend to follow those and not trust the government. But if people keep a rational head and just look into take the government briefings on face value, they will get much more information than the other sources of personalized biases they get into. So to the point, governments are doing much more than what they used to do to communicate with people.
Hey, Jorge, this is Ken. I got a question for you. Under pure capitalism, okay, we would have no social security system, no social safety nets. We'd have senior citizens eating out of garbage cans again. And in the one area, at least in the United States, where we actually have no social safety net, because we have some for healthcare and we have some for food, is in housing. And you can see the way that's playing out in New York and Los Angeles. And there's a public outcry from the people who actually do have homes to do something about, they want the government to do something about the homeless problem. So how do you deal with that in the so-called pure capitalism? You have to have government do something, okay? Because I don't think we can operate with no guardrails whatsoever.
Listen, I can't get my mic. Look, our country was set up on a limited government. All right, we have a judicial system to settle disputes, a police force to protect against crime, the way kind of crimes that Katrina is talking about, and we have a military system that is supposed to. Uh,
You keep going out.
You're dropping out, Jorge.
Problem is, um,
I'm trying to. We can hear you now.
okay, so the problem is the whole issue of centralization versus decentralization, right? That we have, centralization is kind of code for manipulating and abusing and manipulating, okay, especially those people who don't understand the system. So when you have a fiat system that's controlled by central banks, okay, and the quintillion effect and all those things, and we decouple the fiat system or paper money from gold or money from gold, okay, it's created a wealth gap, but people don't understand that, right? That wealth gap has now contributed to all the woes that we've had. Okay, we look, if you look at like Bitcoiners, okay, when there's a problem with the truckers in Canada or with people trying to flee Ukraine, what do? They started sending sats and they started sending Bitcoin to them, right? I don't think that, I mean, Nicholas has a point. It doesn't have to be one extreme or the other. At the end of the day, we're all individuals and we're all empowered to make decisions. And I think that the problem is when you have centralized authority, it's the other thing, it's the other problem, Ken. Who's in office right now that's going to tell me how to live my life? All the liberals love it. They love government. But oh my God, when Trump was in office, all of a sudden they hated having somebody in control of government. And that's the problem. Sooner or later, the other guy will be in office. And we only love government when it's our guy, but there will always be another guy. So because somebody disagrees with privacy, they're going to force me now to give up all my privacy. That's where we've been going. In all of humanity, we've had a problem of not having the privacy. Okay, that's been the problem. I mean, we've had authoritarians, we've had dictators. Right now, everything's being monitored. Surveillance capitalism is something else other than capitalism. I don't know what it would look like because I've never seen it. But I can tell you what, the last 100 years can stand no longer. We've got to try something else. And the concept of decentralization takes out the power of humans to make decisions for other humans. Okay, that's why Bitcoiners gravitate towards Bitcoin, because it is the ultimate expression of capitalism. It's got private property and it's not run by humans, and any human institution is going to degrade to the second law of thermodynamics. And I think that's kind of what Nicholas is trying to work on, is how do we identify who we are while maintaining our privacy and not having in some centralized body.
Or my only response to what you just said, I think one of our problems, at least in the United States, is the view that it's the guy in the White House is always the other person's guy. I mean, as opposed to viewing it at our guy, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Clinton, whoever wins the election, that we don't, unify behind whoever won the election. That is the problem. That we're that split that we don't think, we're thinking about like it's always the other guy now. That did not used to be the case. That probably was
Ken,
not the case when Eisenhower
Ken,
was president.
the reason why is because we've kind of been very binary in our political views. So, in broad strokes, this isn't perfect, but broad strokes, the left wants their hand in your in your wallet, but out of the morality. The right wants the opposite. They want their hand in your morality, but out of your wallet. Okay, the reason why I gravitated towards objectivism, and yes, Katerina, I do study philosophy. It's always a question of which philosophy, however. And for me, objectivism was they want government out of your wallet and out of your morality. That protects the smallest minority on earth, which is the individual. If you don't have individual rights, you don't have minority rights.
So, if I may, the 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 wealth gap problem absolutely, completely is not solely due to a central bank power. Full stop. It's due to Milton Friedman's popularizing the idea of the whole the whole value of a corporation and the whole purpose of corporation is to maximize shareholder profit. That quote, that thing that he gave birth to in the 70s, helped cultivate the Birch Society, helped cultivate a massive swing in terms of the role of corporations. And so what we have now, the corporate crony, the lobby power. There's a bunch of studies that just show that that is what's created the problems of what we have today. So the central banking has its own lots of issues with regards to that, right? You do get some level of stability, but you pay the price. But that is not what created the wealth gap. I got to just kind of like throw the Bible on the table and say, to just say it did not. There's some other things, and I would point to
What's stability, David?
the loss of
What's
multi-stakeholder.
stability?
So, could there be some more natural causes of the wealth gap? Like some people are dumb and some are smart, some are weak and some are strong, and so forth. Some are born in privileged environments and some aren't. There's
No,
some
no.
simpler
So
explanations as well?
yeah, let's put the context of the 20th century. That's what we have to look at when we talk about wealth gap, because we had it in the 20s, the Roaring 20s. What happened was through FDR and through the birth of unions, all of these things gave birth to the middle class, which is what that's what created the American dream. All right, the middle class. What China, what all these other countries in the world, what globalization has done is it allowed other countries to achieve, some really beautiful things for their populace, right? But it's kind of affected us because we're the ones that kind of had we export a lot of what we do now. So a multi-stakeholder form of capitalism, and I would throw caring for Mama Gaia as one of the key stakeholders, right, or the key stakeholder at this point. So it's been the like I said, the Milton Friedman, and just how corporate management and just the laws and just different parts of DC and everything have just kind of been piling on in this single objective of maximizing shareholder profit. That's where the corporate raiders icon and
David,
all the yeah.
But
David,
so wait, let me make a quick point.
that whole situation there with corporation, there was a time where corporations would pass down the profits to the employees, and they would share with the winnings of the corporation, and you would have labor costs, their salaries keep up with inflation, but that's changed with the decoupling of gold from the dollar. That changed everything, and I question what stability you're talking about with the central banks, because since the inception of the
Okay,
central bank, we've lost
let
97%
me.
of their
It,
value.
it wait,
I
wait,
think we.
wait, wait. Let me make a point. First of all, there's no necessary connection between being on the gold standard and the bargaining power of labor. Secondly, it is true, as Ben said, that yes, some people can just not be good at conducting their economic livelihoods, and markets will have consequences for them. But the thing is, even if you have a perfectly free and fair market, that necessarily means there will be winners, there will be losers, and people will lose for a variety of reasons. But the question that we have to go back to, with there being large scale homelessness or something like that, what shall the consequences be of losing? right? Does it mean that you don't get the nice cars and to go on the nice vacations, or does it mean that you are hungry and homeless and die or suffer through easily treatable medical conditions, right? That's what we're talking about. And if you have a society is more than just economic. Society means a common bond between people who have an interest in each other's welfare. And that's where this simplistic notion that all we need is a free market just completely fails.
Okay, so BB found an article from South China Morning Post. China takes steps to revitalize their seed industry as food security fears grow. And that's somebody taking control of their food supply, as I warn everybody to do very regularly. And China, as usual, is ahead of the curve. China in April enlarged its list of state-sponsored seed breeding and production bases for the first time since 2013, a concrete move aimed at addressing rising food scarcity, because they're not stupid. And also on the topic of China, Katerina shares this one, that a Chinese AR startup called Nreal will launch smart glasses in the UK. Attendees are looking at Nreal smart glasses coming soon to the UK from China. And Katerina also shares this one, that after the Elon Musk's Boring Company claims it will finally test a full-scale Hyperloop this year. So that's the a collaboration between Boring and Hyperloop there. The next is from Katerina, that Joe Biden wants to give state and local police access to drone tracking tech. Biden wants to give state and local drone tracking. Drones are facing more and more regulation, and they're going to allow officers to track drones. Okay, makes sense. And Washington Post is reporting record heat has gripped India since March, and that it's about to get worse. March maximum temperatures were the highest in 122 years. Temperatures late this week could near April records. And I think that might be explaining the rain we're seeing here in Thailand when we in April and March that we shouldn't normally be seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like exceptionally hot, but it cools down in the night, so it's not like regular summer. So it's like really hot in the afternoon and cool in the night, but which is quite unusual for an Indian summer.
And the UK's first full-sized autonomous bus hits the road. Scotland's newest bus will be driving itself as it becomes the UK's first full-sized autonomous vehicle to take the roads. Stagecoach will be carrying out on-road testing of its self-driving bus from Monday in preparation of passengers stepping on board later this summer. And those are your headlines. And somebody sent me a really interesting project called Satoshi Island that I'll be pinning to the top of the room here, where they will be selling NFT-based citizenship or residency of sorts. Somebody bought an island, and they're going to do fractional NFT or NFPT, non-fungible property tokens, I assume, of this
Passport money?
I recommend anyone who's planning on going should watch the film The Beach. That will give you a very solid idea of what that's going to be like.
With DiCaprio?
It's an interesting website.
With DiCaprio, yeah.
Crypto-friendly jurisdiction. The island's located in Vanuatu, a country in the South Pacific which is a member of the United Nations. The government supports innovation and has crypto-friendly laws, which was the first check mark in choosing Vanuatu to become the home for Satoshi Island, as they're calling it. After extensive research into the feasibility of creating an entirely crypto-based society, Vanuatu was chosen over all other countries due to the willingness of the government to allow such a place to become a reality. Although not its own country, Satoshi Island will operate with a level of autonomy, and through our engagement with the Prime Minister, the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Lands, we are assisting the entire country with their goal to embrace blockchain technology. Well, that's great until the next election, I guess.
Taylor, isn't Marshall Island is completely on Algorand blockchain? Marshall Island. So
Oh no.
they are all they have a CBDC. They are on this blockchain called Algorand, which is awesome. One of the easiest to get up and running. So yeah, I'm not sure if
For,
this.
for those wishing to set up blockchain projects, exchanges, banks, or other crypto associated businesses, Vanuatu has no tax on profits, dividends, or income for corporations or individuals. There is no capital gains tax, no withholding tax, and no death tax. So, what are you waiting for? Let's go start our own crypto exchange on Satoshi Island, where we can avoid all taxation and live happily ever after. I assume we will be using Starlink.
And bored senseless.
Not in the metaverse, we won't be. How? Stop being so cynical. Okay, well, that takes us to the end of another Tech News Roundtable. Thank you, everybody. We'll do it again to manana.
Thank you.
Thank you.